Hello, my dear martial arts friends of the Paranormal M channel. At last, it's my favorite time of all. I get to sit down with the mic and share mysterious experiences from all over with you, helping you relax and drift off to sleep more peacefully. By the way, thank you so much to everyone who has sent in their supernatural experiences. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Leave a comment below so I can know where you're watching from. Wishing you a good night and sweet dreams. Hey, I've been sitting with this for a long time, and I think I'm finally ready to say it out loud. I grew up in this small, older townhouse from the time I was born until I was about 7. Upstairs, there was this short little hallway connecting all the bedrooms. My twin brother, Mason, and I shared one room. My 2 sisters shared another, and my mom slept in the last room at the end. During the day, it felt like a good home. We went to church, knew the neighbors, and had the kind of community where people actually looked out for each other. On the surface, everything felt normal, safe even. But nighttime was different. Almost every night, when I was trying to fall asleep, this awful heaviness would come over me. The only way I can describe it is that it felt dark, not just emotionally, but almost physically dark. And what's always stayed with me is how specific it felt. It was like that presence would begin near the bedroom door, move slowly across the room, and then somehow drift out through the second-floor window and disappear into the night air. I know how strange that sounds. I do. But as a kid, it felt completely real. Whenever it happened, I'd bury my face into my pillow because I was too scared to lift my head. It felt like if I looked up, I'd see something I couldn't handle. Sometimes I'd try to move, and it was like my body wouldn't cooperate, like I was being held down by fear itself. I never actually saw anything clearly. The terror was always too strong. I just felt it moving through the room, and that was enough. A few times, I remember jolting awake in the middle of the night and running to my mom's door. I'd stand there panicked, knocking, or just frozen, and it would feel like that same dread was creeping up behind me again. Then somehow, I'd wake up back in my own bed the next morning, like the fear had completely overtaken me and shut everything down. Even now, I can't explain that part. And then there was this one memory that still bothers me because it feels so fragmented. One day, some visitors came to the house. I know my twin and I were listed on some state twin registry, so maybe it had something to do with that. Maybe not. But these people felt off. Not threatening exactly, just unusual. They weren't wearing suits or anything formal. Just plain everyday clothes. My mom called me into the living room to say hello, and I remember they set 3 small sheep figurines on the coffee table. That's the part that stuck. 3 little sheep. I remember picking them up and turning them over in my hands. The room was incredibly quiet, almost unnaturally quiet. I also remember noticing that my brother wasn't there with me, which felt odd. And while I played with those sheep, I could feel those adults watching me in this very focused, silent way. I can't tell you much more than that, because the memory gets blurry after that, but I've never forgotten how strange it felt. Not long after, when I was around 7 or maybe 8, we moved out of that townhouse. And just like that, it stopped. No more dark presence. No more nights of overwhelming dread. No more feeling like something was passing through the room. Years went by, and I mostly carried it alone. Then recently, I brought it up to my brother in this casual, almost joking way. I basically said, "This is going to sound ridiculous, but do you remember feeling like there was some kind of presence in our room back at the old house?" I've never been able to explain it. And what he said back completely shook me. That was exactly it. Exactly. I hadn't fed him those details. I hadn't explained it that way, but somehow his memory mirrored mine almost perfectly. And honestly, that's what unsettled me the most. For years, I wondered if it was just my imagination, just a child's fear, just something my mind created in the dark. But hearing him describe the same thing, in almost the same words, made me feel both validated and deeply unnerved. I'm 24 now, and I still think about it. I've struggled with anxiety, with withdrawing from people, with carrying this sense that something happened even if I can't fully name it. I'm not sharing this because I want to make it more dramatic than it was. I'm sharing it because I genuinely want to understand it. I want to know what happened in that house, or at least make peace with the fact that I may never fully know. More than anything, I want to heal. I want to stop feeling like that fear belongs to me forever. And maybe saying it out loud like this is the first step. You know, I've been asking myself for years whether generational curses are actually real, or whether some families just seem to carry an unusual amount of pain and bad luck from one generation to the next. And honestly, I can't shake the feeling that something has been hanging over my family for a very long time. On my dad's side especially, it's always felt like there's this pattern no one can quite explain. Money problems, health problems, one hardship after another. I'm one of 3 sisters, and somehow, each of us ended up dealing with completely different illnesses. My oldest sister has POTS, I have lupus, and my youngest sister has endometriosis. Even growing up, it felt like strange things were always happening to us, so much so that people would actually stop and say, "Wow, your family really does have the worst luck." My oldest sister especially was always sick as a child. This would have been sometime in the mid to late 90s, and it felt like she caught everything imaginable. At one point, doctors were even stunned by one illness she had because they said it was so uncommon in humans. It was always one thing after another. And what scares me most is that it doesn't seem isolated. It feels like it started long before me and my sisters, passed through my mother when she married into the family, and now it's landed on us. I have a daughter now, and there are nieces and nephews in the family too, and I can't stop worrying that whatever this is might keep going. What makes it harder to ignore is that there's a story in my family that I used to think was made up. One of those stories adults tell to keep kids away from creepy things. But the older I get, the more I wonder whether there was something real behind it. This all happened in Portugal, sometime around 1991 or 1992. My dad was mostly raised by his grandparents, so the house they lived in was a really important place in the family. My great-grandmother was almost completely blind because of diabetes, but she could still make out strong contrasts, light against dark, shadows, that kind of thing. She used to sit out on the front porch in the sun and sweep around the entrance like she always did. There was a woman in the neighborhood who constantly caused trouble. She had feelings for my great-grandfather, and she and my great-grandmother fought often because of it. One day, that woman actually asked him to leave his wife and be with her instead. He refused, of course, and apparently she flew into a rage. My mother said that later that night, the woman came back and threw something onto the porch and front doorstep. It was some kind of pale powder. My great-grandmother, not knowing any different, swept it away the next morning like she always would have. That evening, my parents were there for dinner with my great-grandparents and one of my dad's relatives. And according to my mother, that's when everything changed. She said my great-grandmother suddenly started acting in a way that made no sense at all. It was as if she could suddenly see perfectly. She stood up from the table without hesitation and stabbed my great-grandfather's hand with a fork over and over, like she knew exactly where she was aiming. Then she turned and looked directly at my mother, right into her eyes, and in this deep, masculine voice, said my great-grandfather's name and then said, "So, there's a new daughter in the family." My mom said it was nothing like my great-grandmother's normal voice. It didn't sound like her at all. And then, just as suddenly, she seemed to come back to herself. She looked confused, saw the injury, and started panicking and apologizing, like she had no idea what had just happened. For years, I honestly thought the whole thing was exaggerated, or maybe just one of those stories that changes a little every time it's told. But then in 2016, when we visited Portugal, I asked to see the house for myself. We walked by it, and it was completely abandoned. I was told no one had lived there in well over a decade because people said it felt wrong, heavy, negative, unsettling, like the house itself carried something bad. What really got to me was my dad's reaction. He's the kind of man who never scares easily, never shows emotion, never makes a fuss about anything. But he won't even walk on the path beside that house. If I bring it up, he shuts the conversation down immediately, and sometimes he even gets angry. That's what makes me feel like there's more truth to this than anyone wants to admit. I mentioned the house once to my uncle, casually, saying it might be nice to keep it in the family one day. The look on his face honestly shocked me. He was horrified. He told me straight away that the house was bad, that it had terrible energy, and that no one should ever live there. So now I'm left with all these questions. I don't know how much of the story is exactly true, and I know memories can shift over time. But I can't ignore how much suffering seems to follow my family, or how deeply everyone reacts when that house is mentioned. Maybe it's a curse. Maybe it's something tied to that place. Maybe it's just generations of trauma and terrible luck that have shaped the way we see everything. I truly don't know. But I do know that it feels real when you're the one living through it, and when you start wondering whether the people you love, your children, your nieces, your nephews, might carry it next. And that's the part that stays with me the most. Not the story itself, not even the house. It's the fear that whatever began back then never really ended. I've had strange experiences for as long as I can remember. Ever since I was little, I've noticed things that other people would probably call paranormal. I don't usually talk about it much, because I know how it sounds, but it's been weighing on me lately, and I just need to say it out loud. My family moved into this house about 6 years ago, and as far as we know, there's nothing unusual about it. No dark history, nothing like that. But ever since we got here, I've felt like something isn't right, especially around my room. And lately, it feels like whatever it is has been getting stronger. A couple of months ago, I woke up really early, around 6 in the morning, just getting ready to start the day. As I walked past my sister's room, I suddenly heard voices coming from inside. It sounded like a few people having a quiet conversation together, not loud, just casual, like a small group talking among themselves. I stopped right there in the hallway. I couldn't move. I was too scared to open the door, and then I heard this sharp little shushing sound, and everything went completely silent. That was enough to send me straight to my parents' room. I woke my mom up and asked her, almost begged her, to go check on my sister. She went in, looked around, and came back telling me there was no one there. My sister was asleep, completely alone. My mom didn't make fun of me or brush it off because she knows I've dealt with things like this for years. But at the same time, there wasn't really anything she could do. Then later that same night, I heard the voices again. This time, it sounded like they were right outside my bedroom door. I still don't know if that part was real or if I was just so shaken up from the morning that my mind was on edge. But it felt real in the moment. Then, about a month later, something else happened. I had bought a standing fan for my room because it gets really warm at night. The fan used to rotate on its own, but it had been broken for a long time, and by then it only moved if someone physically pushed it. One night I was lying in bed, half awake, half asleep, and I suddenly got that awful feeling that someone was watching me. I started looking around the room, thinking maybe my cat had snuck in, and for a second, I locked eyes with something. At first, my eyes hadn't fully adjusted to the dark, so I couldn't make it out clearly, but the moment they did, it was gone. Then I looked over at the fan and watched it slowly turn on its own toward the curtains. The air caught them immediately, and they started moving wildly. I just stared at it, frozen. Eventually, I forced myself out of bed and turned the fan back toward me. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was some weird coincidence. But deep down, it didn't feel like nothing. The most frightening thing happened just over a week ago. For years, I used to have nightmares that all felt strangely similar, but they had stopped for a long time. Then that night, they came back in a way that felt far too real. I can't even explain the fear of that moment. I was trapped in my own body. It only lasted maybe half a minute, but it felt so much longer. Somehow I remembered I was still on the phone, and I managed to force out the word, "Help." Right after that, I jolted upright. I was sweating, crying, completely panicked. I ran to my mom's room, and she let me sleep there while she took the couch. Later that day, my mom and I decided to sage both my room and my sister's room. I'm not a deeply religious or spiritual person, and neither is she in an extreme way, but we just wanted to do something, anything, that might bring some peace. Since then, things have been quiet. But honestly, I'm still scared. I keep waiting for it to happen again. I don't know what this is, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. I just know I needed to tell someone, because keeping it to myself has been making it worse. And I guess I'm hoping that maybe someone out there has felt something like this too. So I'm from Kerrville, Texas, about an hour or so northwest of San Antonio, and I've lived out here close to a decade now. I'm really used to country life. I see deer all the time, almost every single day, honestly. And I've seen all kinds, healthy ones, sick ones, even a few with strange defects. Back in school, I took animal science, so I've been around enough animals to know when something looks off. And just so you know where I'm coming from, I'm not really someone who jumps to supernatural explanations. I'm pretty grounded, pretty skeptical. Anyway, I'm 20 now, and I've been working a summer job before heading back to college in the fall. I do overnight security at a camp out in Hunt, Texas. It's been a pretty easy gig so far. Most nights, I just ride around in a golf cart from midnight until about 4 in the morning, checking the grounds, making sure everything's quiet. For the first couple of weeks, nothing unusual ever happened. A few kids sneaking around late at night, maybe, but that was it. Then one night, something happened that I still can't explain. It was around 3:30 in the morning, and I was heading back toward the main part of the camp. There's this stretch of road between the entrance and the cabins where the woods get really dense, and there are rocky slopes rising up on both sides. It's always a little eerie there at night, but I'd driven through it plenty of times already. Out of nowhere, I got this strong feeling that something was watching me. You know that feeling when your body notices something before your brain catches up? It was like that. So I started scanning the trees, thinking maybe one of the campers had wandered out or something. And then, I saw it. Up on the ridge, maybe 15 or 20 feet from the path, there was what looked like a deer standing there and staring straight at me. At first, my brain tried to make it normal. It had the general shape of a doe, I guess, but almost immediately, I could tell something was seriously wrong. It was way too tall, easily around 8 feet, maybe more counting how it was standing on the incline. Its whole body looked unnaturally heavy, thick in a way that didn't make sense. Deer usually look balanced, you know? Their necks are slimmer, their heads fit their frame, Everything looks proportionate, but this thing didn't. Its neck was thick and solid, and its head looked huge. It was standing beside a cedar tree, and its head and neck looked almost as wide as the trunk. What really got me, though, was the face. I can't even explain that part well. It wasn't like glowing eyes or anything dramatic like that. It was subtler, which somehow made it worse. The eyes just looked wrong. Empty, but focused. Kind of like when you look at bad taxidermy, and your brain instantly knows something isn't right, even if you can't say exactly why. I stopped and shined my flashlight toward it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I told myself maybe it was some huge buck at a weird angle, or maybe part of a tree stump catching the light in a strange way. I kept trying to come up with anything reasonable, but the longer I looked, the more certain I became that it was real, and that it wasn't anything normal. And then this feeling hit me. Not panic, exactly. Not even fear that it was going to attack me. It was more like this deep, sick feeling that I was looking at something that simply did not belong out there. Like whatever I was seeing wasn't supposed to exist. Later, when I came back through that same stretch on my way out, I looked up there again because part of me still wanted to prove to myself it had been a stump or a trick of the light. But it was gone. And when I looked at the spot where it had been standing, there was nothing there. No stump, no strange tree shape, nothing that even remotely matched what I'd seen. I've gone over it in my head again and again, trying to come up with a logical explanation, and I still can't. I know what deer look like. I know what weird-looking animals look like. This wasn't that. I honestly don't know what I saw that night, but whatever it was, it didn't feel natural. So, a few months ago, my fiance and I moved back into the upper floor of my grandparents' old house. It's been in the family forever. My great-grandfather built it in the mid-1940s, and my grandparents still live downstairs while we stay upstairs. This house carries a lot of history, and not all of it is easy to talk about. There have been several deaths connected to it over the years. My great-grandfather passed away suddenly at the breakfast table. An uncle of mine died by suicide out behind the garage a long time ago. And a few years back, my father also took his life in the small bedroom right next to ours. So that's the kind of weight this place already has. One night, really late, maybe closer to 3:30 in the morning, I was lying in bed next to my fiancé. He was completely asleep. Our cat was out cold too, curled up in her little window perch across the room. I was on my side facing him, half scrolling on my phone, half trying to fall asleep. My back was toward the wall, and there was just a narrow gap between me and the edge of the bed. My shirt had bunched up a little without me noticing. And then I felt it. It was like one cold finger slowly dragged across the bare skin of my lower back. Not a breeze, not fabric shifting. A finger. I felt it slide down my skin, catch briefly on the waistband of my shorts, and then let go. I even heard that little elastic snap. I froze. I turned around immediately and looked behind me, but there was nothing there. The room was still. Everyone in the house was asleep. I remember just staring into that space, trying to make sense of it, telling myself there had to be some explanation. I couldn't think of one. I rolled onto my back, pulled the blanket up, and shut my eyes, hoping that if I ignored it, that would be the end of it. But maybe 30 seconds later, I felt the mattress move. At first, it was subtle enough that I thought maybe I imagined it too. Then it happened again. And again. I opened my eyes and realized the bed frame and mattress were actually rocking. Not vibrating, not settling. Rocking. Slowly and steadily, like someone had their hands at the foot of the bed and was deliberately moving it back and forth. I looked at my fiancé. He hadn't moved at all. He was dead asleep. The cat hadn't stirred either. For a second, I wondered if it could be a small earthquake, but nothing else in the room was moving. The dresser was still, the lamp was still, everything else was normal. But the bed was absolutely moving. In the glow from the television, I could see the sheets shifting with the motion, and I could hear the wooden slats underneath giving that soft, rhythmic creak as the frame rocked. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't violent. Honestly, that made it worse. It felt intentional. I just lay there and kept my eyes closed again. In my head, over and over, I said, "You do not scare me. You do not scare me." I didn't want to wake my fiancé. I know that probably sounds strange, but in that moment, I felt like if this was something I couldn't explain, something spiritual, something dark, I didn't want to feed it more fear or attention. The rocking kept going for several minutes. It would stop for a moment, and I'd think it was over, and then it would start again. Same steady motion, same awful feeling. Eventually, it stopped for good. The next morning, I told my fiancé everything. He had slept through all of it, had no idea, but this was not that. This felt wrong. I've also wondered before whether my father's presence still lingers there sometimes. But whatever touched me that night didn't feel like family. It didn't feel loving. It didn't even feel neutral. It felt invasive, cold, deliberate, like it wanted me to feel afraid and powerless. That's the part I can't shake. I'm usually the kind of person who tries to explain things away first. I look for logical answers before I ever call something paranormal. But with this, I keep replaying it, and I still can't find a rational explanation that fits everything I felt and heard. So now I'm left with that question. What was it? I honestly don't know. But I do know I don't want to feel it again. And maybe it's time for me to cleanse that space again, say my prayers, do whatever protection I can, and trust my gut that something in that room was not welcome. So I honestly don't even know the best way to tell this, because every time I go over it in my head, it still sounds unreal. A couple of years ago, when I was 22, I started dating my boyfriend, Ryan. He's a little older than me, and pretty early on, the first time I went over to his apartment, I noticed this handprint on the ceiling above his bed. Not a stain exactly, more like a mark that looked like an actual hand had been pressed there. I asked him about it, and he brushed it off like it was nothing, so I let it go. Later, once we'd been together a little while, he told me about this shirt he'd found before we met. He said he had gone to his parents' house one evening, and his dad mentioned there were still some old clothes in a laundry basket up in his childhood room. So he went upstairs to look through it, and sitting right on top was this black long-sleeve shirt covered in red bleach marks. When he opened it up, it was covered in these disturbing drawings and words. There was a satanic-looking symbol, a tree with a noose hanging from it, a figure hurting themselves, and the words RIPKL written across it. He brought it downstairs and asked everyone in the house if they knew where it came from. Nobody did. No one had seen it before, or at least that's what they said. He tossed it over a chair with the rest of the clothes he was taking back with him. But that same night, his family saw what they described as a shadow figure walk right out the front door and slam it behind itself. Ryan took the shirt back to his apartment and stuck it somewhere in his room. After that, he started seeing shadow figures in the bedroom and in the hallway. The handprint on the ceiling, the one I noticed that first day, showed up after one of those nights. He said he saw something in the room the night before, then woke up and the mark was there. Eventually, he moved the shirt into the closet in the spare room because it was freaking him out. And after that, flies and bugs started showing up dead right outside the closet door. Now, me being me, I was obviously concerned, but I was also curious. maybe a little too curious. At one point, he went to get the shirt to show me, and then came back empty-handed. He said it wasn't where he left it. We figured maybe he had moved it and forgot. About a month later, I was away on vacation while he was in the middle of moving. We were on FaceTime, and I asked if he had ever found that shirt. He said no, which made no sense because by then, he had packed basically everything he owned. Then a few days later, while we were still on a call, he opened an empty dresser drawer in the new place to put some clothes away, and there it was. The shirt was sitting inside, perfectly folded, right in the center of the drawer, like someone had placed it there carefully. After that, he just kept it. He shoved it in a closet and tried not to think about it. A few months later, I ended up moving in with him because life got messy and it just made sense. But I told him immediately that I did not want that shirt anywhere near our bed. So he moved it under the kitchen sink. And almost right away, the smell started. When I say smell, I mean it was so bad we could barely walk into the kitchen without gagging. We thought for sure something had died under the cabinet. A mouse, a rat, anything. We even had maintenance come out and pull everything apart looking for mold or a dead animal. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And even the maintenance guy said it was one of the worst smells he'd ever dealt with. The weirdest part was that the smell stayed in that one area. The minute you stepped out of the kitchen space, it was gone. Like hitting an invisible line. We gave up trying to explain it because we were moving soon anyway. But while packing, we took the shirt out from under the sink, and within a day, the smell was completely gone. That spring, we moved into a newly renovated apartment, and for the first few nights, everything was fine. While unpacking, we found the shirt again and put it in the office closet until we could decide what to do with it. Then the bugs started. First, it was ants. Not just a few. Swarms. Flying ants all over the walls, the floor, the shelves, the windowsill. It was so many that it almost didn't look real. Then the ants disappeared, and suddenly we had wasps. Constantly. No one could find a nest anywhere, and there were no cracks or openings anyone could point to. After the wasps, it was crickets. Crickets living in the office closet. And all through that whole stretch, there were spiders everywhere too. Then one day, while the cricket thing was still going on, Ryan was walking into the kitchen, and one of the crystals on my shelf got thrown across the room. Not fell, thrown. I heard it hit, and he came running in at the exact same time. That was the moment I was done. I've practiced witchcraft for most of my life, and I'm not the kind of person who panics easily over strange energy. But that was my line. I took the shirt, put it into a protective case with a few other things, sealed it up, and left it closed. Ever since then, nothing major has happened. Every now and then we'll still catch a shadow out of the corner of our eye, or something small will move when it shouldn't, but nothing on the same level as before. It's been almost a year now, and the shirt is still sealed. We keep it sitting on the floor in the dining area beside a bookshelf. And now we have a cat. He refuses to walk past it. If he wants to get to the front part of the apartment, he'll literally take the long way around just to avoid going near that sealed case. We even keep his toys up on the shelf nearby because it's the one spot he never tries to climb toward. I've talked to Ryan about getting rid of it, but he doesn't want to. And honestly, I don't really want to bury it anywhere near where we live, and I definitely don't want to hand it off and make it someone else's problem. So for now, we just live with it. And maybe that sounds ridiculous. Maybe it sounds dramatic. But when you've lived with something that seems to drag shadows, bugs, smells, and this constant heavy feeling behind it, you stop laughing at it. You just learn to respect it. So this happened about a year and a half ago, and I still get chills thinking about it. My friend Marcus and I were driving back from Washington, D.C. to Myrtle Beach. He was around 36 at the time, and it was supposed to be one of those easy, laid-back road trips. We were just talking, smoking, trying to enjoy the ride. And I only mentioned the cigarettes because that little detail ended up mattering way more than it should have. At some point, the GPS rerouted us, said it found a faster way. You know how sometimes you trust it even when it feels wrong? Yeah, that was one of those times. What should have been a quick stretch of road suddenly started dragging on forever. A drive that felt like maybe half an hour somehow turned into this endless crawl through a place neither of us recognized. It was around 7 that evening, maybe a little after, and the sun was already gone. That's when we started realizing something felt off. We were driving through this tiny town, or at least I guess it was a town, but it barely looked lived in. Hardly any lights anywhere. Most of the houses were completely dark, and the few that had light gave off this weak yellow glow, like an old lamp in the back of a room. Some of the homes looked so run down it was hard to believe anyone had been inside them for years. No people outside, no cars moving, no sound, just empty streets. And the strangest part was, it felt like we kept passing the same blocks over and over again, like we weren't actually getting anywhere. Then we realized our lighter was gone, just gone. We pulled over and searched everywhere, under the seats, in the center console, our jackets, the floorboards, everywhere. Nothing. Marcus started getting really worked up. He kept saying, "Man, I need a cigarette. I need one right now." I was trying to joke around, trying to keep things calm, but honestly, I was feeling it too. The whole place had this pressure to it, like the air itself was wrong. Eventually, we spotted this little roadside stop that looked kind of like a gas station, but honestly, calling it that feels generous. It looked half dead. No real signage, no bright pumps, nothing normal. Just this small building sitting there like it had been forgotten. There was a pale woman outside smoking. I remember her looking up at us before we even got close. Then she glanced inside toward another woman sitting at a table, like they both already knew we were coming. After that, she went back in. Marcus said he was just going to run inside and grab a lighter, and I stayed in the car. A couple minutes passed, then 5, then 10. By the time maybe 15 minutes had gone by, I was seriously thinking about going in after him. And then, suddenly he came rushing out, yanked the door open, got in the passenger seat and just said, "Go, just go." I looked over at him and he was pale. I mean really pale. Like he'd just seen something he couldn't explain. Once we were driving, he finally told me what happened. He said the woman's fingertips were purple. Not stained, purple. He said it was the first thing that made his stomach drop. Then when he tried to buy the lighter, the register mysteriously stopped working. They kept making him wait, kept stalling, barely saying anything useful, just kind of keeping him in there. He said the whole time it felt like they didn't want him to leave. That was enough for me, so I drove. About 10 minutes later, we were back in Myrtle Beach. We pulled into this market we'd both been to plenty of times, a place that should have felt familiar right away. But even there, for a few minutes, everything still felt wrong. The lights looked strange. The energy felt off. It was like the world hadn't fully settled back into place yet. I remember thinking, clear as day, if the usual employees aren't in here, we are in serious trouble. For the first minute or two, I didn't see anybody I recognized, and my heart was pounding. But then, little by little, familiar faces showed up, normal sounds came back, and it was like reality started locking back into place. I still can't explain where that town was. I've tried to think of every logical answer. Maybe we were tired. Maybe we were just creeped out and feeding off each other's nerves. Maybe it was some forgotten little place in the middle of nowhere, and our minds filled in the blanks. But deep down, that's not what it felt like. It felt like we crossed into somewhere we were never supposed to be. Somewhere time moved wrong. somewhere people weren't really living so much as existing. And for a little while, it honestly felt like that town had already surrendered itself to something dark. So, here's something that has stayed with me for years, and honestly, I still don't know what to make of it. I grew up with two older siblings. My brother was about 2 years older than me, and my sister was 5 years older. So by the time I came along, my brother could already talk a little, and my sister was fully in that age where she could run around, talk, and boss everyone around like a pro. And like a lot of siblings, we didn't exactly get along all the time. We argued constantly, teased each other, picked fights over nothing, the usual. I remember this one day when I was around 10, maybe 11. We had this dining area that opened right into the kitchen, so it all felt like one big room. I was sitting at the dining table with a bowl of cereal, and my brother, his name was Mason, was over by the fridge. I could see him perfectly from where I was sitting. He was maybe 12 or 13 then, and he said something like, "I'm heading over to my friend's house." I don't remember exactly how he said it, but I do remember the name he used. I think it was Evan. For some reason, I immediately got sarcastic and shot back. "I thought you didn't have any real friends, just imaginary ones." He snapped back with something about me not having friends either, and at that point I was scrambling for a better comeback. So I said, "Oh right, Evan, your imaginary friend. Is that who you mean?" And I was completely making that up. I just said it to mess with him. But the second I said that name, something happened that I still can't explain. Out of nowhere, this memory came rushing back to me, clear as day. Not fuzzy, not dreamlike. It felt sharp and real, like I had somehow stepped straight into it. In the memory, I was a baby, maybe around a year old, maybe even younger. I was sitting in one of those baby carriers, and my brother, just a toddler then, was leaning over the left side of it. I heard him say, really clearly, "Hey Evan, come over here. Isn't she cute?" Then I heard footsteps, soft ones, light and careful. And then, this long white beard dropped down into the carrier and brushed against my face, tickling my nose. I remember giggling. I can still feel that part somehow. Then a wrinkled hand gently pulled the beard back, and this old man leaned over the other side of the carrier. He looked incredibly old. Like, not just elderly, ancient. Maybe in his late 90s, if I had to guess. He had short white hair, like it had just been neatly trimmed, and a long white beard. He had this kind, gentle face. He was wearing a gray wool coat, maybe a trench coat, something heavy looking. But the strangest part was that he didn't look fully solid. He was there, and I could see him, but there was something faint about him too. Not transparent exactly, just not fully like a normal person. Then, in this soft, scratchy old voice, he said, "Hello, Lila." And hearing my own name, well, a version of my name, from him, absolutely terrified me. I remember feeling scared in the memory itself, like my little baby body was panicking. But at the same time, I was also scared sitting there at the table at 10 or 11 years old, reliving it. It was like I was frightened in both moments at once. And then I realized I was actually crying. The memory just ended there. 1 second I was in that strange moment as a baby, and the next, I was back at the kitchen table, staring down into my cereal like I'd just been dropped back into reality. I never forgot that. So I've always had this quiet feeling that maybe, just maybe, I saw a ghost that day. What really messes with me is that my memory is honestly terrible. My mom swears I have a great memory, but I really don't think I do. I forget things all the time. I can barely remember what I did last week with that much detail. So the fact that I suddenly remembered something from when I was about a year old, or maybe even younger, just doesn't make sense to me. That's the part I still can't get over. Not just who he was, but how I remembered him at all. I've told this story a few times in my head, but saying it out loud still gives me chills. This all happened in 2016 when I was a senior in high school. It started on prom night. I was at my girlfriend's house, sitting alone in her pool house while she and a few friends had stepped outside for a smoke. I kept every light off because we didn't want her mom noticing we were still awake. So I was just sitting there in the dark, scrolling on my phone, waiting for them to come back. It had probably been 20 or 30 minutes when I suddenly heard it, clear as day, footsteps in the grass right outside. Not one or two either, more like 9 or 10 steady steps, like someone was walking right up to the building. I called out, thinking my friends were back, but nobody answered. That feeling hit me immediately, like the air had changed. I stepped outside to look around, and there was no one there. No movement, no voices, nothing. At the time, I tried to talk myself down and act like maybe I was just hearing things in the dark. But deep down, I knew I had heard those footsteps. Then, 2 nights later, things got even stranger. My girlfriend called me in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m., crying. She said something was outside her house, banging against the wall. She held the phone up near her window, and I could hear it too. It sounded almost rhythmic, like someone throwing a ball against the siding over and over. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. She looked outside and couldn't see anyone. Now, even before that week, we'd already half joked that her house felt haunted. There was always this weird heaviness there, like you were never fully alone. But after the footsteps and the banging, it stopped feeling like a joke. So, in the kind of decision only teenagers would make, we decided to use a Ouija board the next night. We borrowed one from a friend and waited until her mom had gone to bed. Then we set up in the sunroom, me, my girlfriend, and our close friend, who already believed he had some kind of spirit attached to him after visiting a haunted prison. We put the board on the coffee table, sat around it, and placed our fingers on the planchette. The first thing we asked was simple: "Is anyone here with us?" Almost immediately, the planchette started moving toward yes. We all froze and looked at each other, because no one expected it to happen that fast. We asked who we were talking to, where he was from, and the board spelled out answers smoothly, almost effortlessly. I don't remember every detail now, but I remember one of the spirits said he was from South Africa, which completely threw us, because my girlfriend's family had a nanny from South Africa living with them at the time. When we asked if he was connected to her, the answer was yes. When I asked if he was the one whose footsteps I'd heard outside the pool house, he said yes. My girlfriend asked if he was the one banging on the side of the house, and again, yes, followed by an apology. That part stuck with me. The idea that whatever it was knew exactly what we were talking about. We eventually asked if there were more spirits there, and it told us there were 3. So we said goodbye and asked to speak to someone else. The next spirit called himself Jonah. He said he was attached to our friend and that he had died in prison. The strange thing was that even though the board moved just as strongly as before, it didn't move the same way. The first spirit had this sweeping motion, almost smooth and curved. Jonah moved more sharply, more directly, like he had his own rhythm. That was one of the moments when it really sank in for me that this didn't feel random. At one point, because we were trying to prove to ourselves that nobody was pushing the planchette, we changed how we touched it. We used awkward angles, even the backs of our fingers, and it still moved. Not clumsily either, smoothly, purposefully. It honestly felt less like we were guiding it and more like it was pulling us. Then we made the mistake. We asked if there were any evil spirits there. The answer came back yes. So we asked to speak to that spirit. This one gave the name Tabi. Right away, the feeling changed. The movement was slower, heavier, and shakier than the others, like the planchette trembled as it slid. We asked what she wanted, and she answered, everything. We asked what that meant. Our souls? Yes. I asked if she wanted mine, and the answer was no. Then my girlfriend asked if Tabi wanted hers. Yes. We said goodbye immediately. Looking back, that should have terrified us enough to stop right there. But in that moment, I wasn't really feeling fear. I was too stunned, too caught up in the reality that something was answering us. Later that night, my girlfriend called out to her father. He had passed away suddenly the year before I met her, and it was still a huge wound in that family. When the board answered that it was him, everything changed again. The energy felt stronger than with anyone else we had spoken to. He had been a bodybuilder when he was alive, and somehow even the way the planchette moved felt powerful, fast, forceful, almost jerking our hands across the board. It would fly to yes or no, then slide back to nearly the exact same resting spot every time. We talked to him for a long time. At one point, we started asking questions silently in our heads, and the board still answered correctly. I remember asking, just in my mind, whether my girlfriend and I would end up getting married. The answer came back fast. No. I actually laughed, because even in that surreal moment, it felt so blunt and specific. Then my girlfriend brought down her little sister, who was maybe 11 or 12 at the time. She wanted to ask their dad questions only he would know. Small personal things from before and after he died. The answers kept coming, one after another, right and immediate. You could see it on her face. She was comforted and heartbroken at the same time. The very last thing he told them was the part none of us ever forgot. We asked if he had a final message, and he spelled out, "I love you. I miss you. 1, 2, 3. My girlfriend and her sister both burst into tears. Later she explained that 1, 2, 3 had always been their private code for "I love you." I drove home that night completely shaken. I kept glancing into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something sitting in the back seat. The whole world felt wrong after that, like I had stepped too close to something people aren't supposed to touch. A week later, my girlfriend and I broke up. We stayed friendly for a while and saw each other now and then, but life moved on the way it does. Then, 2 years later, my mom called me and told me my ex had died by suicide. That news broke something in me. And I'd be lying if I said my mind didn't go straight back to that night. To Tabi, to the way the board answered her, to that awful yes. I still don't know what I believe. I don't know if we opened a door, if we invited something in, or if grief just makes people tie impossible things together because they need answers. I only know that after everything that happened, I have never touched a Ouija board again, and I never will. I still remember that drive up from New Jersey to Connecticut in the fall of 2008. The air had that sharp, clean bite to it, and the hills were covered in deep reds, golds, and orange leaves. It should have been one of those peaceful weekends you look back on with a smile. I was on my way to visit my old friend Sadie. Her mother and mine had been close for years, so we basically grew up like family, and her husband, Michael. I hadn't seen them in a long time, and they'd just moved into this old place out in the countryside, not far from the Massachusetts border. It was beautiful out there. Rolling hills, wooded roads, that kind of quiet you only get far away from the city. From the outside, the house looked charming in that worn, old-fashioned way. It was a big colonial built sometime in the 1800s, set back from the road, surrounded by huge oaks and maples. The kind of place that feels full of stories. But the second I pulled into the driveway, I got this feeling I couldn't explain. Just this sudden uneasiness, like I'd stepped somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. It felt like the house noticed me. I told myself I was just nervous from not having seen them in years, and I let it go. I wish I hadn't. That first evening was completely normal. Warm, friendly, easy. We had dinner, caught up on life, laughed about old memories, talked about what they wanted to fix up in the house and all the antique furniture they'd been collecting. Nothing about it hinted at what was coming. The first real thing happened on the second night. I was asleep in the guest room upstairs when I woke up to a scream. Not the kind you mistake for a TV or a dream. This was raw, terrified. It sounded like it came from inside the house itself. I sat straight up in bed, heart pounding, just listening. Then everything went silent. I got up and stepped into the hallway, trying to figure out where it had come from. The air felt strange, heavier somehow. But by the time I moved toward the sound, it had stopped, completely. Like whatever made it knew I was listening. I stood there for a while, debating whether I should wake Sadie and Michael, but I didn't want to scare them over something I couldn't explain. So I went back to my room. Then I heard it again. Louder this time. And right after it, this low, awful laugh. I've never heard anything like that before or since. It didn't sound human. It sounded cruel, deliberate, like something was enjoying my fear. What made it worse was that neither of them woke up. I kept thinking, how are they not hearing this? Over the next few hours, things just kept getting worse. My room turned freezing cold even though the heat was running. I heard footsteps in the hallway, then whispers. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear them coming through the walls, low and threatening. Out of the corner of my eye, I kept seeing movement, shadows twisting where there shouldn't have been anything. At some point, near dawn, I woke up again and saw something on the walls. At first I thought I was dreaming, but I wasn't. There was this thick black liquid slowly seeping out of the plaster. It was dark and glossy and wrong, and the smell hit me almost immediately. Rot, sulfur, something metallic underneath it. It was so strong it turned my stomach. I stumbled out of bed, half choking on the smell, and that's when I finally ran to wake them up. I must have sounded completely out of my mind because I was trying to explain screams and laughter and the walls leaking black sludge all at once. They looked worried, but skeptical. Like maybe I'd had some kind of nightmare. Then Michael went upstairs to check. I'll never forget his face. Sadie came up behind him, saw the wall, and started panicking. Whatever that substance was, it was still there, thick and wet, sliding down the plaster. And then, as if that wasn't enough, Michael looked out the window and stepped back so hard he nearly tripped. There was something outside. A face, pale, watching us from the dark, and two red eyes fixed on the house. I saw it too, just for a second, long enough to know I wasn't imagining any of it. We spent the rest of the night downstairs in the living room with every light on, too afraid to go back upstairs. We could hear furniture dragging above us, heavy footsteps moving from one end of the hallway to the other, and every now and then, that same laughter. By morning, we were done. We didn't even really pack. We grabbed what we could and left. No long discussion, no trying to explain it away. We just got in the car and drove. As we pulled away, I looked back once. There was a figure standing in the upstairs window. I still wish I hadn't looked. Later on, I heard bits and pieces about the place from a local historian. Supposedly, there had been a murder there sometime in the 19th century, something involving a family and a man who claimed he was being spoken to by a pale figure. I never learned the full story. Honestly, I didn't want to. There were other rumors too. Strange rituals in the woods, sightings along the road at night, reports of foul smells on the property, and people seeing things in the windows. Sadie and Michael sold the house not long after that, and from what I understand, they lost money doing it. We never really talked about that night again. Not properly. It just sat there between us, too big and too awful to put into words. Over time, we drifted apart, but I've never forgotten it. Even now, I can still hear that scream if I let myself think too long about it. I can still see those walls, that black liquid, that face at the window. And more than anything, I still remember the feeling I had when I first pulled into that driveway. That quiet warning, because whatever was in that house knew I was there from the moment I arrived. So I need to tell you about something that happened a while back, because even now, I still can't explain it without getting a chill. I woke up in the middle of the night with this incredibly specific feeling that someone was lying behind me in bed. Not just a vague sense that I wasn't alone. I mean, I could actually feel the weight of a person there, like a full-bodied presence pressed into the mattress. What woke me was the fact that it started to move. Then, whatever it was seemed to get up. I felt the mattress slowly lift and settle the way it does when someone climbs out of bed. It was such a familiar sensation, you know? The kind you recognize instantly if you've ever shared a bed with someone. That soft rebound of the mattress, that subtle shift in weight. It felt completely real. But the strange part was, after that, there was nothing. No footsteps, no voice, no door opening, no sound at all. I was still in that half-awake, foggy state, and for a second I actually thought it might have been my aunt, because she'd been visiting earlier that evening. But then I remembered she'd already gone home. The only other person in the house was my friend, we'll call him Eli, and he was sleeping downstairs. I knew for a fact he wouldn't have come up in the middle of the night. The moment that clicked, I rolled over fast and looked around my room. Nothing. No one standing there, no movement, no shadow slipping away. Just my room, completely still. Even my cat was curled up asleep near the end of the bed like everything was perfectly normal. I'm pretty sure it was somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning, because I remember waking up once before that and once again later. The next morning, Eli and I were in the car with another friend, and I brought it up. I told them what I'd felt, mostly because it had weirded me out so badly and I wanted to say it out loud. And as soon as I finished, Eli just looked genuinely unsettled. Then he told me that almost the exact same thing had happened to him that same night. He said sometime around 2:30 or so, he woke up because it felt like someone had dropped onto the bed beside him. Not gently either, more like a sudden plop. He'd been asleep on his back, felt the mattress move hard enough to wake him, turned to look, and there was nobody there. When we started talking more about it, I remembered that I'd had this weird, uneasy feeling before bed too. For no real reason, I'd gone around checking the locks downstairs and made sure my bedroom door was shut, which is not something I normally do. Eli said he'd felt off too, like he was being watched, and he'd had trouble getting to sleep. And I believed him immediately. I know him really well, and he's honestly such a bad liar that if he were making it up, I would have known right away. He also mentioned that he'd talked in his sleep a couple of times that night. The second time, he said he remembered mumbling something like, "I'm sorry," while he was having a bad dream. I never heard any of that from upstairs, but it added another layer of weirdness to the whole thing. Now, to be fair, we had watched a disturbing movie a couple hours before bed. So yeah, maybe that put us on edge a little. But we'd done scary movie nights before plenty of times, and nothing like this had ever happened. We weren't drunk, we weren't high, and neither of us is especially jumpy or dramatic. That's what makes it so hard to brush off. We were in different rooms, in different beds, and both of us felt someone on the right side of us at nearly the same time, either getting in or getting out of bed. I still don't know what to make of that. So, I've been living in this house for almost 6 years now. It's just me and my 2 sweet little dogs, and for a while, I really tried to convince myself that was the full list of residents here. But honestly, I don't think it is. The strange stuff started almost right away, maybe on the second or third night after I moved in. At first, it was little things, random banging sounds, footsteps when nobody else was there, that heavy feeling you get when something just feels wrong. I kept brushing it off, telling myself I was adjusting to a new place. But then one night, while I was half asleep, I heard, and actually felt, someone breathing right by my ear, like they were leaning over me and whispering. I jolted awake and told myself it had to be a dream. I wanted it to be a dream. Except it kept happening, night after night. Not long after that, the bedroom light started turning on and off by itself. And I don't mean flickering. I mean the switch itself would physically move, like someone invisible was flipping it. The TV started doing the same thing. Then came the voices, faint at first, like people talking in the next room when I knew perfectly well I was alone. The first time it really shook me was one night when my friend Mara came over to watch a football game. We had dinner, hung out for a few hours, and she left sometime around 1 in the morning. A couple hours later, I got up to step out onto the porch. As I was walking back through the living room, clear as day, I heard a man's voice right in front of me say, "Your friend seems nice." I froze. It scared me so badly I felt it in my chest. And my dogs, who are usually gentle and goofy and completely unbothered by everything, started growling low and baring their teeth at the empty room. I remember saying out loud, "Please don't do that again. I'm not ready for that." And weirdly enough, everything did go quiet for a few days. But it didn't last. After that, the voices came back louder, more often, and around that same time, I started seeing things too. The first visual thing I ever saw happened while I was washing dishes. I looked up through the kitchen window and saw a young woman walking up my driveway. She looked completely real, dark hair, baseball cap, brown work shirt. I assumed she was some kind of delivery driver, so I went to the front to tell her she had the wrong side of the house. There was nobody there. A few days later, my mom was visiting, standing at that same sink rinsing out a few glasses, and she suddenly called out, "Honey, that delivery girl is here." I had never told her what I saw. I asked her what she meant, and she described the exact same woman, young, dark hair, dressed like a delivery worker. That was the moment I stopped telling myself I was imagining things. Since then, I've seen a man too. He usually appears in the kitchen. He'll just casually walk through, wearing khaki pants and a faded orange shirt, like he belongs here. More than once, I've watched him head straight through the closed laundry door as if it wasn't even there. I've seen him enough times now that it doesn't even feel surprising in the moment. It's only afterward that it hits me. And then there are the shadows. So many shadows. And what I call the light shows. My dad has seen movement in the hallway too, and my nephew swears he once saw what looked like a person halfway forming near the master bedroom, like a figure trying to come together, but not fully making it. But the strangest thing that has ever happened to me in this house happened while I was taking a bath one night. I was in the tub, just trying to relax, when I heard what sounded like an elderly woman singing in the hallway outside the bathroom. Not humming, singing. Soft, old-fashioned, eerie singing. I got out and opened the door immediately. Nobody. I felt so unsettled that I grabbed my phone off the bathroom counter to call my dad. I noticed the battery was at about 30%, but I dialed anyway. As the call was trying to connect, I heard the singing again, right outside the bathroom door. Then, just as the phone started ringing, I heard that same woman's singing come through the phone itself. For several seconds. Clear as anything. And then the phone died. I just stood there staring at it, dripping water all over the floor, completely stunned. I couldn't reach my dad again until I charged it back up. Honestly, I could keep going. There are strange things happening here all the time. Everyday things that stop feeling ordinary the second you realize there's no explanation for them. I know how all of this sounds, I really do. But I'm not making it up, and I'm not confused about what I've experienced. I'm not unstable, I'm not hallucinating, and I'm not under the influence of anything. I just live in a house that, for whatever reason, is very, very active. Let me tell you about something that happened when my twin brother Eli and I were kids, around 8 years old. We grew up in rural Australia, out near the foothills where there were only a handful of homes scattered across the land. Our place was big, maybe around a dozen acres, and it had a strange history to it. Long before we lived there, there'd been a little church on the property, with a tiny cemetery nearby, and an old post office not far off that had been turned into a house. By the time we were there in the 1990s, all that remained of the church were the old concrete footings and the graves near the house. Years later, Mum told me that not long after we first moved in, I'd casually said that sometimes an old woman sat on the end of my bed. Apparently she never frightened me. She'd just sit there quietly and smile. My parents asked around and learned that a family who had once lived on the property had lost a young daughter there. They planted a fruit tree for her, and years later it had been cut down when the house was extended. My bedroom, they said, had been built right over where that tree once stood. And over the years, people connected to that property had all kinds of strange stories. But the experience I remember most clearly is the one my brother and I shared. At the time, I had 2 single beds in my room. Sometimes Eli would sleep in the second one. They were arranged in an L shape in the corner, with our heads near the same corner of the room. His bed was closer to the bedroom door, and mine was along the wall. One night, we'd both fallen asleep, and at some point in the dark, I woke up feeling this pressure on my head. At first, I thought it was him messing around, so I kept my eyes shut and told him to stop. And then he said, "I'm not doing anything. You stop pushing my feet." That's when I realized something was really wrong. I told him I was still in bed and not touching him, and he said he was in bed too. What both of us were feeling wasn't like hands exactly. It was more like this strange, surrounding force, gentle but very real, pressing around my head and around his feet. Not icy cold, not painful, just tingling, heavy, impossible to ignore. Then he told me, very seriously, not to open my eyes. That scared me immediately. I pulled the blankets up over my head and stayed completely still. I could still feel that pressure, like it was pushing me deeper into the mattress. It honestly felt like it went on forever, though it was probably only a few minutes. Then, little by little, it faded. After a while, he asked if I could still feel it. I said no. We whispered back and forth, trying to make sense of it, and then, because we'd seen it done on television, we pinched ourselves to check if we were dreaming. It hurt, so that didn't exactly comfort us, but somehow we settled down enough to go back to sleep. The next morning, we compared everything. We both knew it hadn't been a dream. We both felt the same thing at the same time. Then Eli told me what he saw. When he'd opened his eyes, he looked over toward me and said there were these little figures on top of my bed. He didn't know how else to describe them back then except as little goblin-like things, about 2 feet tall, moving in this eerie, playful way, silently stepping and swaying over me. He said they were smiling at him, and that smile scared him more than anything. Then he looked toward the bedroom doorway, which should only have been slightly open, and saw that it was wide open. He said it was completely black beneath the hood, except for 2 glowing red eyes. No face, no features, just darkness. He watched it turn its head toward him, then turn away and move silently down the hall toward the front of the house. As it left, the little creatures hopped down off my bed and followed after it. No footsteps, no voices, no sound at all. That part has stayed with both of us our whole lives, not just because it was terrifying, but because we experienced it together. I didn't see what he saw, but I felt what he felt. And when morning came, our stories lined up in a way that still gives me chills. I've always felt there's more to this world than we understand. I don't claim to know what it was, spirits, some kind of energy, something tied to old places, grief, memory, land. I honestly don't know. But growing up in a place with an old cemetery, the remains of a church, a creek running nearby, and generations of stories attached to the land, it felt like history never really left. Some nights, it felt like it was still there, watching. So, this happened on a Friday night, when I was staying over at my manager's house to watch the dogs until Saturday morning while she was out of town. I was sleeping in the guest room, and it was one of those stuffy rooms where everything was shut tight. The windows were closed, the door was closed, and there wasn't even a fan running. One of the dogs, the bigger one, was stretched out near my feet, and the tiny little one, seriously, small enough to fit in a handbag, was curled up right against my back. I had my face turned toward the edge of the bed, and sometime during the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up. Later, when I grabbed my phone, I saw it was exactly 3:20 a.m. What woke me up was the strangest feeling, like someone was gently fanning my face. Not a normal breeze, but the kind you'd feel if someone was waving their hand in front of you because you were hot. And at the same time, I could hear this faint voice, kind of crackly and distant, like words coming through static. I couldn't make out what it was saying at all. I just froze. I've had some unusual experiences before, things I'd definitely call supernatural, but this felt different. I got that full-body goosebump feeling, like the energy in the room had shifted. I was honestly scared to even open my eyes while it was happening. But the second I finally did open them, it all stopped. There was nothing there. I rolled over, and both dogs were still asleep like absolutely nothing had happened. The little one stirred only because I had to move to turn over. After maybe 10 minutes, I somehow calmed down enough to fall back asleep. This time, one dog was still at my feet, and the tiny one had curled up against my stomach. Then at 4:20 a.m., it happened again. Same breeze on my face, same distant, static-like voice. And at that point, I was just done. I had to be up by 5 for work. I'd only gone to sleep around 11, and I was running on way less rest than I wanted. So with my eyes still closed, I said, kind of irritated, "Knock it off." And it stopped. But then it started right back up again almost immediately. This time my eyes were open, and still, there was nothing there. I was not prepared for that at all. So I started praying right there in bed, just saying the Lord's name and asking for peace. And as soon as I did, everything stopped completely. After that, I didn't even try to go back into a deep sleep. I just got myself ready and left for work early. I still don't fully know what to make of it. Part of me wonders if I was half dreaming, caught in that weird space between sleep and waking. But it felt so real, and it happened twice, the same way both times. That's what gets me. The only reason I can come up with for the dogs not reacting is this. My boss's mom, Marla, passed away about a year or two ago, and she had spent plenty of time in that house. The dogs would have known her. So if it really was a spirit, maybe that's why they stayed calm. Maybe it wasn't something unfamiliar to them. When I told my boss about it later, she got really quiet and admitted that she's had her own moments in that house too. She said there are nights when she feels pressure beside her in bed, like someone sat down or climbed up next to her. But when she looks, there's nothing there. We've actually talked about me staying over again sometime in the next couple of months, and honestly, I don't know how I feel about that. The strange thing is, it didn't feel evil. It didn't feel threatening. It just felt present, like something was trying to get my attention. Welcome back, my friends, to the Paranormal M channel. Wow, it's so good to be back after a long day doing what I love. Thank you so much for always supporting the channel and for sending in your mysterious experiences. I'm always happy to be here with you, and I hope you have a great night's sleep. Now, without further ado, let's dive into today's stories. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. So, a few nights ago, my boyfriend Evan and I did this little weekend getaway out in Montauk, and we stayed at this old place called Seabrook Manor. Neither of us had any clue people even whispered about it being haunted. Evan booked it because it looked charming and classic. Big windows, old school vibes, the kind of place you imagine drinking coffee in a robe and pretending you're in a movie. We were supposed to stay 2 nights. The first night was totally normal. Well, normal-ish. We originally got a room on an upper floor, and the second we stepped inside, it had this weird smell, like a freezer that had been unplugged for a decade. You know that sour, stale, cold air smell? I couldn't do it. We went right back down and asked to move. They put us in room 214 on a lower floor, and honestly, it felt like an upgrade. It was bigger, quieter, and it had this huge deck. Out on the deck was this little stone statue, not quite a gargoyle, more like a squat lion thing. And the creepiest part was how it was positioned, like it was watching the far end of the walkway instead of the room. Evan laughed and was like, "Great, we've got a guard." I laughed too, but I didn't love it. Anyway, that first night, fine, peaceful, slept like normal people, no drama. But the second night is when the energy shifted. We'd been asleep for a while when Evan nudged me and whispered my name like he didn't want the walls to hear it. He told me he heard the elevator, the doors opening and that soft rolling sound, like someone had gotten out. And normally that wouldn't be a big deal, except the hotel felt empty. All weekend we barely saw anyone. So at around 2 in the morning, it just felt wrong. Like, why would anyone be moving around now? Then Evan goes, "And the pillow. Look." One of the pillows that had been propped on a chair was now on the floor, like it had slid off. It wasn't tossed across the room or anything dramatic, but it hadn't been there before. I tried to be the calm one. I was like, "Babe, it probably just slipped, or you bumped the chair earlier, and it's a weekend. Maybe someone checked in late." I said it like I believed it, but the truth is, once he said it out loud, I couldn't unfeel it. I kept the bedside lamp on. Evan was tense, I was tense, and we just stayed awake, talking in low voices, doing that thing where you try to explain away fear while your body refuses to calm down. We kept checking the door, checking the corner of the room, checking the deck through the curtains like we expected to see a face pressed up against the glass. Eventually, it got close to 4 a.m., and I was exhausted. So I did that very naive thing people do in horror movies. I looked at the clock and said, "Okay, it's past the creepy hour. We're safe now. Let's just sleep." and I turned off the lights. I fell asleep almost instantly, like my body had been waiting for permission. And then, maybe 15 or 20 minutes later, I snapped awake. Not gently, not confused. I woke up like my whole body was screaming, "Move." My heart was pounding so hard I swear it made my ribs ache. I called Evan's name, over and over, like I needed to hear another human voice right that second. He jolted up too, totally panicked, asking what was wrong. And here's the part that still makes my skin crawl. I didn't think. I didn't sit up and assess. I didn't grab a shirt. I didn't rationalize. I just ran. Evan came after me, frantic, dragging me back inside while whisper yelling, "What are you doing?" And once the door shut, we just stared at each other, both breathing like we'd been chased. At that point, there was no, maybe it's nothing. We decided we were leaving. Right then. Not after breakfast, not after sunrise, immediately. We started throwing things into bags. Evan was laser-focused, quiet, pale, moving fast. I kept doing this weird, half-laughing thing, like my nervous system couldn't decide whether to cry or crack up. And Evan kept snapping, "Stop, just pack, just pack." When we finally got into the hallway, the hotel felt even more silent than before, like the building itself was holding its breath. We pressed the elevator button and waited. And waited. And waited. It took forever. Long enough that I started imagining it opening and nobody being inside. Long enough that my palms went sweaty. When it finally arrived, we got down to the lobby, and the front desk guy looked at us and made this little joke about us leaving so early. Like it was funny. Like we were just dramatic tourists. Evan didn't laugh. I barely could. And now it's been a few days, and I still don't feel normal. I've dealt with anxiety before, like real, intense anxiety, and this flipped a switch in me. At night, I feel this heavy pressure on my chest and arms, like the air is thicker, like the room is crowded even when it's empty. I wake up and just listen, waiting, bracing, and nothing happens, but my body doesn't believe that nothing is happening. I've tried little comfort rituals, went to church, did a white light meditation, tried to calm myself down, but I still feel unsettled, like I didn't fully come home when I came home. And I keep wondering, quietly, when it's dark, if something followed us. Or if the scariest part is that my brain and body got spooked so badly, they're still acting like they're trapped in that room. Okay, so this started when I was about 8 or 9. Back then, my grandpa, his name was Elias, and I had this routine. Every night, we'd pray. Like, really pray. We were serious about it. I'm not like that anymore, but at the time it felt like this protective habit, you know? Like if we didn't do it, something would be off. One night, Grandpa Elias had to leave early for a late rehearsal for a show he was involved in, and we just didn't pray. I told myself it was fine. One night wouldn't matter. But the second I got into bed, I had that feeling in my chest, like my body knew I'd skipped something important. I couldn't sleep. I kept rolling over, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. And then, at some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember is waking up suddenly, like someone snapped their fingers right next to my ear. I turned over, and there was a little girl standing near my bed. She looked old-fashioned, like she belonged in some dusty photo. She was wearing this vintage sleeping gown, the kind with long sleeves, but it was ripped and filthy, like it had been dragged through mud. Her hair was a mess, thin, stringy, stuck to her face, and around her neck, God, I still hate saying it, there was this rope, like a noose. And she was clutching this dingy cloth sack, the kind you'd use for laundry, bunched up in her hands like she'd carried it there. She was so dirty, I could swear I could smell her. Not like a normal kid who'd been playing outside. More like damp and rotten, like old basement air. I was frozen. I couldn't even breathe right. Then my brain finally caught up, and I just started whispering prayers as fast as I could, shaking under the covers, begging for it to go away. I didn't stop until I must have passed out again. And then, this is the part that really messes with me. About a month later, I skipped praying again. Not on purpose, just fell asleep. That night, she came back. This time, she wasn't holding the sack anymore. Just the rope was there, hanging loose around her neck. Her hair was worse, plastered across her face so I couldn't fully see her features. But I knew it was her. Same height, same gown, same horrible stillness, like she wasn't breathing. Like she was being displayed rather than standing there like a real person. After that, I moved out of that house and went to live with my mom. New place, nicer apartment, totally different neighborhood. Years passed, and honestly, I forgot about her. Not because it didn't haunt me, but because enough normal life piled on top of it that it started to feel like some nightmare my brain made up when I was little. By then, I wasn't praying at all. That part of my life had faded out. Sleeping without praying was just normal. One thing never changed, though. I've always been terrified of closets. I don't know why. I just hate them. So I had this rule. Closet door stays closed. Always. No exceptions. One weekend, my cousin, Rory, came over for a sleepover. We were messing around late, and for some reason I finally told him about the girl. It was the first time I ever said it out loud to someone. He laughed, of course. Like, not in a mean way, just that "you're so full of it" kind of laugh. He kept calling it a creepy story I made up to freak him out. Eventually, we got tired. I remember getting up and checking the closet door like I always did, making sure it was shut tight, and then we crashed. And then it happened again. The same exact kind of waking up. Instant. Sharp. Like something yanked me out of sleep. I turned my head. My closet door was open. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and clicked the flashlight on. And there she was, inside the closet. Same little girl. But this time her hair was swept aside just enough that I could see her face clearly. And I'm telling you, it wasn't like before, where it was just scary because she was there. This time it was horrifying because of what she looked like. Her eyes were gone. Just dark, hollow sockets with streaks of dried blood running down her cheeks like someone had painted them there, and they never fully dried. Her gown was still torn, but now it looked stained, like rust-dark patches all over it. And her mouth looked cut, like the corners were sliced upward into this forced, awful smile. Not a smile like someone happy, a smile like something pretending. I panicked and shook Rory awake and hissed, "Someone's in the closet. Someone is in the closet." I don't even know why I said someone, like it was a normal intruder, but my brain was scrambling for anything that made sense. He lifted his head, looked past me toward the closet, and I will never forget what he said. He goes, "What the hell is that?" And then he disappeared under the blanket so fast it was like a cartoon. Just gone. And I dove under too. We stayed there, both of us shaking, not talking, barely breathing, just waiting for morning like it was the only thing that could save us. When the sun finally came up, we crawled out and the closet door was shut again. Like nothing had happened. Like it was all some shared hallucination. But Rory was pale. And when I asked him what he saw, he described her. Exactly. The missing eyes, the blood, the torn gown, the too wide smile, every detail. And that's what gets me. Because if it was just me, I could have convinced myself it was a nightmare, or sleep paralysis, or my imagination. but he saw it too. I don't know what she is. I don't know why she showed up when I stopped praying as a kid, or why she followed me years later to a completely different apartment, or why it was always in that same pattern. Waking up suddenly, turning over, there she is. I haven't seen her in a long time now, and I'm grateful for that. Truly. But I swear, even telling you this right now, I can feel that cold, crawling chill along the back of my neck. Like if I turn my head too fast, I might catch the closet door open again. So, I grew up in the same house from the time I was little until I left for good. It wasn't some ancient farmhouse or anything. My dad had it built in the late 80s, and as far as we ever knew, nobody had died there. No dramatic history, no tragic headlines. But locals used to talk. Not in a spooky tour way, more like casual. Yeah, this area used to be where different native tribes lived, type of talk. And I don't know. I guess I filed that away as my only explanation for why the place never felt completely quiet. Like the house could look normal, smell normal, sound normal, but the air would still feel charged, like you'd rubbed a balloon on your hair and didn't realize it until you walked through a doorway. By the time I was about 13, my parents finally started letting me stay home alone after school, with my older brother, Miles, technically, but he had practice most days. So I'd get home first, and there'd be this long stretch where it was just me and the house. And listen, I know how dramatic it sounds, but being alone in that place felt different than being alone anywhere else. The moment I'd step inside, it was like my body would react before my brain could. That prickly feeling up the back of your neck. The sensation that something was aware of you. So I made a routine. It was ridiculous, honestly, but it was the only thing that made me feel like I had any control. I'd do a quick sweep of the rooms with a kitchen knife, like a tiny, terrified security guard. Then I'd lock myself in the bathroom and sit on the closed toilet lid playing games on my phone until I heard Miles come home. The bathroom was my safe spot. Small, bright, a lock, solid walls. And if I sat with my back against the tub, nothing could come up behind me. The rest of the house always felt like it had too many corners. Too many dark little angles where something could just be. So one day, I'm in there like usual. I don't know, maybe an hour had passed. I'm trying to act normal, trying to pretend I'm not listening for every creak. And then I hear the side door, the one that leads from the garage into the house. It made this specific squeal when it opened, a sound I could recognize in my sleep. Then I hear footsteps, heavy, familiar steps moving into the kitchen. I hear keys hit the table. And then, this is the detail that still makes my stomach twist. I hear this loud, obnoxious burp. And I know that sounds funny, but it was so Miles. Like, when you live with someone long enough, you know their little sounds, their rhythm, the way they move, even their gross habits. I remember thinking, oh, thank God. Just instant relief, like my whole body unclenched at once. I set my phone down and stood up, finally ready to unlock the door and stop hiding like a lunatic. But the second my fingers touched the doorknob, something inside me just slammed on the brakes. It's hard to explain without sounding insane, but it was like hearing a song you know by heart. Only one note is slightly off. Close enough that you recognize it, but wrong enough that your skin crawls. Everything I just heard felt staged, like an imitation that didn't understand the real habits behind the sounds. Miles almost never came in through the garage. He used the front door, always. And he didn't toss his keys on the kitchen table. He kept them in his room. Little details, but they mattered. Suddenly, it all felt like someone had copied my brother from memory without actually knowing him. So I didn't unlock the door. Instead, I texted him, "Are you home?" He replied immediately, "No, leaving practice now. And I swear to you, my blood turned to ice. Because the moment I read that message, every sound in the kitchen stopped. Not gradually, not like someone walked away, just off. Like someone hit mute, and then I heard the kitchen stools scraping across the tile. Not a shove, not an accident. It sounded like someone was lifting one edge and walking it, dragging it carefully out toward the living room. Slow, deliberate movement in an open concept house where there's nowhere to hide. I texted Miles back with shaking hands. There's someone in the house. Right after that, my dog, Nova, jumped onto the couch. I heard the cushions squeak, that familiar vinyl-ish sound, and then she started growling. Not her normal, someone's at the door growl. This was deep, ugly, like she was looking straight at something she couldn't understand. I'm in the bathroom, silently crying, gripping the knife so hard my hand cramped. I remember pressing my free palm against my mouth to keep myself from making any noise at all, because suddenly, it felt like whatever was out there was listening. Then the thumping started. And this is the part that messes with me, because what I'd heard before sounded like my brother. Normal, familiar. But now it sounded like someone much bigger was moving through the house. Heavy steps, faster, angrier. Things shifting, bumping, like objects were being jostled or tossed. And Nova was barking like crazy, barking the way she did when she truly wanted something gone. I thought about calling the police, but my brain kept spiraling. What if they come and there's nothing? What do I even say? Hi, my house is pretending to be my brother. So I stayed there, trapped between terror and embarrassment, waiting for something to happen. Minutes passed like hours. And then Miles texted, "I'm home, walking in now." And, no joke, the noise stopped the second that message came through. Like it had been waiting for that moment. I heard the front door open. I heard Miles's real voice, slightly muffled, calling, "Hello?" And then, confused, "Is someone here?" That was the first time I could breathe. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped out, expecting the house to look wrecked. I was bracing myself for the aftermath. The overturned stools, the scattered stuff, anything that proved I wasn't imagining it. But everything was perfect. The kitchen stools were where they always were. The table was clean. Nothing on the floor. No signs of anything being moved, tossed, or touched. And the garage door? The one I heard open? Locked. From the inside. Unmoved. The only proof I had, was Nova, frozen on the couch with her fur standing up, eyes wide, trembling like she'd just seen something she'd never forget. That happened almost 10 years ago, and it still makes my throat tighten when I talk about it. Because whatever that was, it didn't just make random noises. It copied someone I trusted. It tried to lure me out. And when it realized I wasn't coming, it got angry. I'm not an expert, and I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what it was. Mimic. Something darker. Something we don't have a name for. I just know the feeling of it. That artificial, almost human wrongness. And I know this. If my gut hadn't stopped my hand on that doorknob, I don't like to think about what might have happened if I'd stepped out. Okay, so I need to take you back to Yosemite Valley. Late summer, 1989. Just after we got married. Like, brand new married. We'd said our vows in that little valley chapel the night before, and the next night, around midnight, we got this spontaneous, ridiculous idea. Let's go for a swim in the Merced River. It was me and my wife. Let's call her Marissa. And we were feeling untouchable in that newlywed way, you know? Giddy. A little reckless. The park was quiet, and it's Yosemite. You can be out at any hour, no curfew or anything. I'd grown up coming to these spots with my family, so I felt like I knew the area like the back of my hand. We parked off Northside Drive, just east of Bahono Bridge, and there wasn't a single other car. Not a light. Not even the sense that anyone else existed out there. We grabbed towels, a blanket, flashlights, and started down this little dirt path, maybe 30 yards through trees to the sandy edge by the water. And halfway down, I swing my flashlight left, and there are two men standing just off the trail. Tall, still, side by side like they'd been placed there. I froze for half a second because, in the dark, your brain tries to turn things into anything except people. I shined the light right on them, realized, oh, guys, and I immediately dropped the beam and muttered this quick, embarrassed, sorry. They didn't move. They didn't nod. They didn't say anything. Not even a little, hey, or a shift of weight. Just statues. What freaked me out most was how formal they looked, like dark suits, or at least stiff, dressy clothing. It didn't fit the setting at all. Marissa didn't even notice them. She was already moving toward the sand. We reached the riverbank. The water was loud. Moonlight was coming through the trees in these broken silver sheets, and Marissa starts spreading the blanket out like it's the most normal midnight swim in the world. I sit down next to her, and then, from the trees on our left, a couple steps out. And I swear to you, they're dressed like they just came from a wedding. A bride and groom, full on. Not costumes, not casual. Wedding clothes. They stop at the river's edge about 10 yards from us, talking softly. I can't make out the words because of the river, but I can hear the tone, that low, private conversation. After a moment, they sort of angle toward us, like they're watching. And it hit me in this cold, crawling way. Are they talking about us? I turn and look back up the slope, and I can still see those two dark men near the trail. Same place, same posture. Then, on the right side, another figure comes out and steps onto this rock that juts into the water. And this guy, he starts moving in this hunched, exaggerated way, like an ape-man. Arms loose, crouching, swaying, doing this threatening little performance. It wasn't playful. It felt directed. And my brain is scrambling, trying to make a normal explanation. Okay, maybe we interrupted something. Maybe it's some weird night game. Maybe there are more people than we thought. But the feeling in my body was pure alarm, like we were surrounded. Marissa, somehow, is still trying to treat it like nothing. She's like, well, I guess swimming is off, kind of shrugging. Then she goes, super casually, I left the cigarettes in the car. Can you grab them? And I snapped, like not at her, but just, the request landed wrong. I did not want to walk back up that path past those two silent men, leaving her alone with the wedding couple and the crouching rock guy. But I didn't want to sound afraid, so I stood up all annoyed and dramatic, like, fine, I'll get them. I walk back up, get to the car, grab the cigarettes, and then I do something I hadn't planned on doing. I pull it out. And when I shut the trunk, I make a big, deliberate noise, like, listen up, everyone. I go back down and stick the sword in the ground near our blanket, like I'm planting a flag. Marissa looks at me like I've lost my mind. What are you doing? And I said, loudly, something along the lines of, when people sneak around and won't speak to you out here at night, I want them to know I'll defend us if they try something. Even saying it now, I cringe a little. It wasn't me. It was fear trying to wear a tough guy mask. Marissa was stunned, like, did I just marry a lunatic? And after another minute, we decide to leave. We pack up fast, get back to the car, and drive away. And again, there are no other vehicles, no headlights, nothing. Just us and the dark road. We drive down El Portal Road toward Cascades picnic area. another river spot I knew well. And I'm thinking, okay, that first place was a fluke. This one is farther out. Surely it's empty. The parking lot is empty, no cars, until our headlights sweep across a picnic table. And there are people sitting there in the dark, not lit by anything, just there. We both saw them, clear as day in the headlights. We look at each other like, seriously? But we decide to go to the beach anyway and just keep to ourselves. This time I leave the sword in the car, trying to behave like a normal human. We start down the wider trail, maybe 100 yards through the woods. Moonlight is enough that you can see the path. And up ahead, slightly off the trail, there's a woman standing still. She's wearing this ornate white gown, and the closer we get, the more elaborate it looks. Veil, lace, pearls, like something from another era. She's pretty, but older, and she has this calm, placid smile. What made my skin go cold is that she looked like she had this pale blue-white glow. Not a flashlight glow, just a wrong kind of brightness. I'm thinking, I'm about to walk right past her. What do you even say? Marissa is quiet, and I can tell she doesn't want to set me off because she already thinks I'm spiraling. When I'm right beside the woman, I look her straight in the eyes and manage this small, polite, trembling, "Hello." She keeps smiling, doesn't answer, just watches me pass. A few steps later, Marissa says, totally baffled, "Why did you just say hello to a tree?" I whip around, and my stomach drops, because where the woman was is a dead tree stump, pale in the moonlight. That's it. No veil, no face, no lace, just a stump catching light. I actually jumped, like my body couldn't accept the switch. And I felt humiliated and dizzy at the same time. Like, am I losing it? I know what I saw. I know it. I tell Marissa, I thought it was a woman in a dress. She gives me that skeptical newlywed look that says, okay, honey, sure. We keep walking. And now I start noticing shapes, dark figures, standing off to the sides of the trail between the trees. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to be there. I don't even shine my light at them this time. I just ask Marissa, very quietly, "Do you see them?" She says no, and she's getting irritated, like, "Why are you seeing things?" And that's when I start to get defensive. Because it's one thing to be scared. It's another to be told you're imagining everything while your gut is screaming. I even remember thinking, bizarrely, that maybe I'd been reading too much mystic stuff, like I'd opened some mental door and now I was noticing things you're not supposed to notice. It sounds silly, but when you're in that moment, your brain reaches for any explanation. I stop at the top and look down. And there are two figures near a fallen log in the river, doing something. Fishing, maybe? At 1 a.m.? I don't know. One of them has this red glow on his face, like a cigarette ember. I point it out again. Marissa says she sees nothing. And God, this is where I lost my composure. I snapped, "Oh yeah? Then what the hell is that?" And I swing my big flashlight beam down onto them. The instant the light hits, the figures turn. Fast. Too fast. And they glare up at us. And I felt this immediate surge of danger, like a cornered animal realizing it's been spotted. They were upright, but bulky, blacker than the dark around them. And the way they moved, it wasn't human. Marissa grabs my arm hard. "We need to go. Now." Later she told me when one of them looked at her, its head turned in this twisting way, like it wasn't limited by bones the way we are, like a snake. We turn and start back toward the car, and that 100-yard trail suddenly feels like a mile. And I remember telling her, through clenched teeth, "Don't run. If we run, they'll chase. Just walk fast. Keep it together." We're both in panic, but we force ourselves to move quickly without sprinting, like we're pretending we're still in control. When we reach the parking lot, the picnic table where the people were, gone. Not shifted, not empty chairs, not they moved, just not there. There was a picnic table farther away on the opposite side, but it was empty, like we'd imagined the whole thing. We got in the car and drove off like our lives depended on it. And now, finally, Marissa admits it. She says, "Okay, I thought you were just freaking yourself out. But those things at the river, whatever they were, I saw them too." So we drive back toward the valley, and then we turn up the mountain road toward Tuolumne Meadows. We talk the whole time, comparing what we saw, trying to line it up. The bride and groom, the two shadow men, the crouching animal-like guy. And then we pull into a viewpoint overlooking the valley to catch our breath. The headlights sweep across the turnout. And they're there. All of them. As if they beat us there and took their places. Bride, groom, two shadow men, the animal guy. 15 feet in, standing like they were waiting, facing us. We both shout, just this raw shock. I'm like, "Do you see them? Tell me you see them." Marissa says yes, and her voice is shaking. We don't even turn the car off. I just throw it in reverse and back out, and we're gone. At this point, it's not just fear, it's disbelief. Because how? How could they keep showing up ahead of us when we hadn't passed a single car for miles? How could they possibly know where we were going? Maybe 45 minutes later, sometime between 2 and 3 a.m., we pass a little ranger-style cabin or park building area. Porch light on, and standing in that cone of light, like a staged tableau, bride, groom, two shadow men, the animal guy. I remember Marissa making this strangled sound, like her brain couldn't process it anymore, and I couldn't either. It was beyond spooky. It was impossible. We kept driving for what felt like forever, seeing weird shadows in the trees, some of which might have just been our terrified minds making patterns out of darkness. Hard to know anymore. The last thing I feel confident about, truly confident, happens near Tenaya Lake. We pull into the lot to rest for a minute. The area is open, clear, plenty of moonlight, no trees close by. Across the highway, there's this steep, rocky road cut leading up to a ridge, an awkward place where you wouldn't expect anyone to be. It gave me goosebumps all over again. But this time, we don't engage. We don't shine the light. We don't react. We just sit, breathe, and eventually drive away. When we finally reach the Tuolumne Meadows area and pull up near the camp store, dawn is starting to come in, gray light, the world returning to normal. And outside the store, there are figures sitting with their backs against the wall. And when I tell you the relief I felt, because they were just people, regular backpackers, waiting for morning, you could tell immediately. The way they shifted, the way they looked up, the way the world fit around them. After hours of feeling like we were being haunted by something that didn't belong, it was like stepping back into reality. And that was it. That was the end of the first night of our honeymoon. This long, bizarre, terrifying procession of silent figures and wedding clothes and impossible reappearances. I've spent decades turning it over. Ghosts, residual hauntings, folklore stuff, aliens, tricks of light, shared panic. I've heard every suggestion, and honestly, I still don't know. But here's the strange part. Nothing actually harmed us. No one touched us. No attack. No injury. They just appeared, again and again, like they wanted us to notice, like they wanted us unsettled. And the older I get, the more I wonder if the real danger wasn't them. Maybe it was what fear did to us. how it narrowed our world until every shadow felt alive. Still, I can't lie. A part of me is grateful it happened. Because life can get so clean and explainable. And then something like that reminds you there are corners of the world, of your own perception, that don't behave. And whenever I ask people if they've ever had something they can't explain, and they tell me no, I feel this odd sadness. Not because I want them scared, but because I think having one true mystery in your life changes you, even if you never solve it. So, we moved into this brand new apartment in London back in 2021. Fresh paint, new everything. Literally the first people to ever live here. We're right at the top, the only flat on our floor, which sounded like a dream at the time. The place is gorgeous. Huge rooms, high ceilings, these massive floor-to-ceiling windows that make it feel bright and open even when it's gray outside. But almost from the beginning, there's been this thing. At certain times of day, especially after dark, though not always, we hear running. Not vague creaks or old building noises, proper running, like someone sprinting down the hallway with purpose. It's loud enough that I've actually spun around mid-sentence because my brain just assumes someone's there. And my little one, Milo, he's always like, "Mummy, who's running?" in that matter-of-fact way kids have, like it's the most normal thing in the world. At first, I blamed the flat below us because they've got small kids. Easy explanation, right? Except we started paying attention, really listening, and it just didn't line up. And the thing is, this building is so well insulated. We don't hear our neighbors, like, at all. No TV through the wall, no footsteps, nothing. So why would we only hear that? Then for a while I convinced myself it was the roof. Maybe birds. Maybe a fox? London has foxes everywhere. And sometimes, honestly, it did sound like it was coming from above, which made that theory feel even better because it was safer. Logical. Contained. Not creepy. But the more it happened, the less it felt like an animal. It wasn't scratching or scurrying. It was human pacing. Like a person running. And the running isn't even the only part. There have been these little moments that make the air feel wrong, like shadows shifting where they shouldn't. Not dramatic ghost in the mirror stuff, just I'll catch movement out of the corner of my eye, like someone ducking back around a corner or walking past a doorway. Most of it happens in our main hallway. Coincidentally, of course, that's where the running always seems to be. More than once, I've been sitting watching TV with my back to the hall door, and I've felt someone behind me. Properly felt it. There have been times I've turned around and snapped, "Oh, just don't," thinking it's my partner, Ethan, trying to creep in and startle me. And then, nothing. Empty hall. Quiet. No Ethan. No one. One afternoon, this was in 2022, I walked into Milo's room. He wasn't in his cot. The room was tidy, normal. But the cot had been pulled out from the wall, like someone had dragged it forward. Not a few inches, enough that it stopped me in my tracks. And I remember standing there thinking, nope, that's not right. Because I can barely shift it myself without really putting my back into it. Milo was too small at the time to do anything like that, and Ethan was at work. I even replayed my own morning. Did I move it? Did I catch it with my hip? Did I imagine it? But no. I would have noticed. It was moved. The honest truth is, neither of us has ever felt properly alone in this place. Not once. Even when I'm by myself in the daytime, sunlight pouring in, I still get that prickly feeling like I'm being quietly watched. Not threatened, just observed. Like something is sharing the space and doesn't feel any need to hide. And here's the part that makes it more complicated. I spoke to a colleague, Leah, because she's the type who goes to a medium regularly, and apparently, the woman has been uncannily accurate for her in the past. I wasn't even trying to be dramatic. I just asked for any ideas, like, what else could this be? And I mentioned, kind of casually, that I keep my dad's urn in the spare room. Leah's face changed instantly, like the color drained out of her, and she went, "You need to get rid of that." Which, absolutely not. No chance. That's my dad. I'm not getting rid of him like he's an old lamp. And the thing is, Milo talks about him. Like, talks about him. He calls him granddad sometimes, like he knows him. He's said he's seen him, that he's spoken to him. And I have photos up, and I bring my dad up naturally. Little stories, little memories. So it's not like he's never heard his name. But Milo seems to know him in a way that still makes my stomach flip, because my dad died when Milo was just a few months old, too young to remember anything. Yet sometimes Milo will say things with such certainty, like he's describing someone he genuinely knows. And none of this has ever felt sinister. That's what messes with me. There's no screaming, no slamming doors, no scratches, no "leave this place now" horror movie stuff. It's more like the atmosphere is off, the vibe is wrong, like something's slightly out of alignment and your body notices before your brain can explain it. We're actually selling the apartment now, partly for practical reasons, but if I'm being real, we're just tired. Tired of that unsettled feeling. Tired of second-guessing every sound, every shadow, every little movement in the hallway. And I keep coming back to the same thought. I just want to know what it is. Because if it's animals, fine. Tell me it's animals and I'll sleep better. If it's the building settling, great. Show me where and why. If it's some weird acoustic thing, brilliant. I'll take it. But whatever the reason, this place has never felt empty. Not once. Okay, so before I jump in, you've got to know this about me. Sleep paralysis has been a weird little thing in my life for as long as I can remember. It's usually the same routine. I'll think I've woken up, but I can't move, can't talk, can't do anything except stare and wait it out. It's terrifying, but it's predictable. The very first time it happened, I was maybe 13, 14 at the most. I'd fallen asleep facing this dresser mirror, and when I woke up, I saw it. This shape behind me. Not a person exactly. More like a shadow wearing the idea of a person. No face, no details, just this heavy, dark presence that felt way too close. Then I got older, and the sleep paralysis would still happen once in a while, but I never saw that shadow again. Not for years. Honestly, I started to think it was just my brain doing brain things. Fast forward to now. I'm 18, and last weekend I went out with my boyfriend, Eli, to hang at his friend Mason's place. They live out in the middle of nowhere, and those two are the type who always have some insane story. Lights flickering, footsteps when nobody's there, stuff like that. And I'll admit it, I get curious. I'm that person. So I brought this old spirit board I'd had for months. It had basically become wall decor because every time I tried it, nothing happened. And I'd started to feel kind of silly for even owning it. Late that night, like after midnight, we ended up wandering around outside. Not exactly on train tracks like a horror movie, but along this quiet service path near them where the rails run through. There's this abandoned stretch nearby, half-collapsed sheds, old signs, that kind of forgotten place vibe. We stopped there, and Mason and I decided to try the board, just for fun. Eli hung back, messing with his phone light and laughing at us. And listen, I know. First mistake, only 2 people on the planchette. Second mistake, doing it out there in the dark like we're asking the universe to mess with us. I did the basic question, the one everyone does. Is there anyone here who wants to talk to us? At first, it didn't move. I remember thinking, see? Told you. It's nothing. Then the planchette started sliding, slow, deliberate. It spelled G-E-T. And I swear to you, my stomach dropped so fast it felt like I missed a step on a staircase, because we both knew what it was going to say. I didn't even let it finish. I yanked my hands back and blurted out, "Goodbye!" like I was slamming a door in someone's face. Mason did the same, and we just looked at each other for half a second like, did that just happen? And then we basically power walked back like our lives depended on it, trying to laugh it off, but not really laughing. The rest of the night was normal enough. And honestly, part of me still tried to rationalize it. Like, maybe Mason pushed it. Maybe we nudged it without realizing. Maybe my brain just wanted a scary moment. But then the next night happened. I was home alone. Totally alone. I got in bed and started praying, quietly, just trying to calm myself down. I remember feeling my body relax, and I guess I drifted off mid-prayer. That's when it hit. That awful, familiar waking up feeling. Except, I didn't wake up. And there it was, the shadow. Only this time, it wasn't just a faceless shape in the background. It was closer, right there. And it had eyes. I know how that sounds, but I swear, eyes. Not normal eyes, just these focused points that felt like they were looking into me, not at me. And here's the part that messed with me. This didn't feel like my usual sleep paralysis. Usually I'm frozen. This time I was fighting, like I was flailing and trying to shove it away and begging, actually begging, "Please, let me wake up." And then suddenly I did. I sat up, breathing like I'd run a mile, and I remember actually saying out loud, "That was so weird. I hate this." Like I was trying to make it smaller by naming it. Eventually I fell back asleep. But then, later, maybe an hour or so after, I woke up again. And this one was worse. Same thing. I'd been praying and drifted off without finishing, and then my eyes opened, and I knew instantly it was happening again. The shadow was there in the same place, like it had been waiting, like it never left. But this time it wasn't leaning toward my face. It was leaning toward my ears, like it wanted to speak right into them, or crawl inside my head through them. I don't know. I just know I was horrified in a way that made my whole chest ache. I fought it. I was pushing and kicking and trying to get away. I could feel myself moving, but I couldn't tell if I was actually moving in my bed, or if it was all happening inside my brain. It felt real either way. And it talked. Not like a normal voice, more like the idea of words pressed into my mind. And it told me, "I'm keeping you here forever." I started crying. Full-on crying, pleading, bargaining, like you do when you're terrified and your logic has completely clocked out. I remember saying, "Please, I have work in the morning. I can't stay here, I can't." Like that was going to matter to whatever it was. And then, this is the part that makes me feel sick even saying it. I panicked so badly that I tried to negotiate. I told it, if it let me wake up tonight, it could come back tomorrow. The second the words left my mouth, I woke up. I shot upright, gasping. My cheeks were wet. My body felt like it had just been through something. And my room looked normal, but everything in me felt wrong. Like I'd opened a door I didn't know how to close. I called Eli afterward, and he tried to comfort me, but even he admitted he'd been having these vivid nightmares since that night we messed around outside. He said maybe it's night terrors, maybe stress, maybe our brains latched onto a creepy moment and ran with it. And I want to believe that. I really do. But it doesn't feel like my normal sleep paralysis anymore. It feels like something is responding, like it's getting closer, like it recognizes me now. And now I'm sitting here thinking about what I said, what I offered, when I was scared out of my mind. Because what if it actually does come back tomorrow? And what if next time I don't wake up? Have you ever met someone who just isn't scared of the paranormal at all? Like, not even a little? Because I swear, I stumbled into that kind of person, and it still makes me laugh when I think about it. So, I'm from Finland, and a while back, I started dating this wonderful single dad named Mikko. The first time I visited his place, I honestly felt like I'd stepped into a storybook. He lives in this ancient farmhouse he inherited from his grandparents. One of those big, weathered homes that looks like it's been quietly watching the world go by for generations. And here's a funny detail. His family's been on that land for so long that his last name is actually the same as the name of the little village nearby. Like the whole area and his family are basically stitched together. It made everything feel even more rooted. Like the house didn't just belong to him, he belonged to it too. Inside, it's like a living museum, but not in a dusty, creepy way, more like warm and charming. Old wooden trunks, embroidered linens, antique tools, faded photos in frames that have been touched by 100 hands. And somehow, he's managed to blend it all with modern life. Coffee machine on a vintage table, a smart TV sitting under a creaky old beam, like it's the most natural thing in the world. After we'd been together for a while, Mikko asked me to move in. I was thrilled. Truly. The house, the garden, the whole property. It felt magical. He takes such good care of everything too. The yard is always tidy, the paths are swept, flowers everywhere in summer, and even in winter it has this cozy, glowing feeling. It's the kind of place where you half expect to see little lanterns hanging in the trees. But, yeah, there's also a different kind of fairy tale living there, because I'm pretty sure we weren't alone. It started with little things, random thumps when nobody was upstairs, a cupboard door that would be slightly open even though I knew I'd shut it, something falling off a shelf for no reason. And at night, this was the worst part for me. I'd hear what sounded like slow footsteps, like someone walking down the hall while the whole house was asleep. At first, I tried to act normal. I didn't want to be the nervous new person in the old house, you know? So I'd just quietly panic on the inside. Then one afternoon, we're sitting in the living room. I'm in this old rocking chair trying to get some work done on my laptop. Mikko is across the room doing his own thing, completely relaxed. And suddenly, out of nowhere, the living room door swings open with this long, dramatic creak. I'm not proud of this, but I basically launched out of the chair like it had bitten me. I pointed at the door with wide eyes and went, "Did you see that? Did you see that?" And Mikko, without even looking up properly, just goes, "Yeah, old house." Like he was commenting on the weather. Then he smiles, all casual, and adds, "Could be my great aunt stopping by." I just stared at him like, "Excuse me? Did you just make a joke about a ghost like it's a neighbor dropping off cookies?" Later that night, we're in the kitchen making tea, our little routine. The kettle's humming, the mugs are out, everything calm. And I finally say it. I'm like, "Okay, I need to talk about something. I think this house is haunted." And this man, this absolute weirdo in the best way, doesn't argue, doesn't dismiss me, doesn't do the whole, "It's the wind, it's the pipes, you're imagining it" thing. He just nods, like I've said something completely reasonable, and goes, "Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. The house is over 100 years old, and we've got records of my family living around here for centuries." And he shrugs, and says, "If they're here, they're my ancestors. Why would they want anything bad for us?" That is not the kind of comfort I expected. I thought he'd reassure me by saying ghosts aren't real. Instead, he basically said, "Oh yeah, they're real, and they're probably family." And the strangest part? It actually made me feel a little better. Not totally better, I still jump at noises, I'm not going to lie. But his calmness is so steady it's contagious. Like he's lived with these sounds his whole life and filed them under normal farmhouse stuff. Plus maybe grandma. So I have to ask you, have you ever met someone like that? Someone who can sit in a creaky old house full of footsteps and mystery and just sip their tea like, "Yep, that's probably a relative." Okay, so before I start, I have to tell you, this isn't my story. It happened to my Aunt Marisol, and she's told it so many times that it feels like it lives in our family's bones. This was in northern Mexico back in the late 80s. Marisol was the kind of teenager who thrived on trouble, always sneaking out, always daring somebody to do something ridiculous, always acting like nothing could touch her. My mom, her little sister Lucia, was the complete opposite. Quiet, careful, the kind of kid who apologized when someone else bumped into her. One afternoon, Marisol had a few girls from school over. They were hanging out in their bedroom, doing each other's hair, flipping through glossy magazines, laughing at boys, normal teen stuff. And of course, Lucia kept hovering, begging to stay. She was that annoying little sister who didn't want to be left out of anything. At some point, one of the friends, Roxana I think, unzips her bag and pulls out this homemade spirit board. Not a fancy store-bought one, just cardboard with letters and numbers drawn on it, and a little cutout piece they used like a pointer. Marisol and her friends lose it, giggling like it's the most thrilling thing in the world. Everyone's leaning in, daring each other to touch it, except Lucia. Lucia immediately goes pale and starts whispering, "No, no, don't do that. That's a bad idea. Please don't mess with that." But you know how teenagers are. The more someone begs you to stop, the funnier it becomes. So they start playing. And it's not even respectful. It's teasing, mocking. They're asking dumb stuff like, "What's your name? Why aren't you answering? Are you scared? What do you look like?" They're laughing the whole time, rolling their eyes, acting like they're too grown to be afraid of anything. And nothing happens. Not a twitch, not a scrape, not a single spooky moment. So after a while they get bored and toss the board aside, like it was just another toy, and move on with their afternoon. But that night, this is the part that still makes my skin tighten. Marisol wakes up sometime after 2 in the morning. She's in bed, and she shares the room with Lucia and 2 of their brothers. The room is dark, still, quiet in that heavy middle-of-the-night way. She wakes up with this awful, sinking feeling in her stomach, like dread, but physical, like your body knows something before your brain catches up. She's lying on her side facing the wall, so her back is to the rest of the room, and right away she realizes she can't move. Her arms won't budge. Her legs won't budge. She can't even turn her head. Marisol had experienced sleep paralysis before, so she recognizes what it is. But she said this felt different. The fear was sharper, meaner, like something was in the room with her, not just in her head. Minutes pass, long minutes, and she's trying so hard to force her body to respond, to wiggle a finger, to make a sound, anything. And then she feels it. Her mattress dips, slowly, right behind her, like someone is carefully sitting down on the edge of the bed. She can't turn around. She can't see. She can only feel that pressure, that weight, settling in beside her like it belongs there. She starts panicking, inside her own body, trapped, breathing fast, praying, trying to scream and realizing she can't. And then she hears a man's voice. Not one of her brothers, not her father, not anyone who should have been in that room. It's right behind her, and it says, so calmly, so cruelly, and the worst part is the tone, like it's amused, like it's repeating something she'd already said earlier, throwing it back at her. "Turn around," it says again. "Go on." Marisol told my mom she felt like her heart was going to burst out of her chest. She tried to pray, but her thoughts were tangled. She tried to move, but nothing worked. And then, finally, something breaks, like the spell cracks. She lets out this screaming, full-body, blood-curdling scream that jolts everyone awake. Her brothers jump up, my mom bolts upright, someone flips the light on, and suddenly the room is chaos. Everyone asking what happened, everyone crowding around her bed. And Marisol, shaking, drenched in sweat, just blurts out that it was a nightmare, that she must have been dreaming, that it was nothing. But the next day, when the sun was up and the house felt normal again, she pulled Lucia aside and told her everything in a quieter voice, like she didn't want the walls to hear. And ever since then, this is what sticks with me. Marisol has been terrified of those boards, not in a playful way, in a serious, don't even bring it in my house way. Even now, decades later, she's the one who warns all of us, me, my sister, all the cousins, every time someone brings it up like it's a joke. She always says the same thing, real soft but dead serious. Don't invite something to speak if you're not ready for it to answer. Before I tell you this, I just need you to understand something, okay? I don't drink, I don't do drugs, and I'm not someone who has hallucinations or anything like that. I've replayed this 100 times, and I still don't have a neat explanation for it. So, this happened really recently. It was a Sunday night, technically Monday morning, and I met up with my ex. I'll call him Cal. It was around 12:45 a.m., and yeah, of course it was one of those nights where the moon was ridiculously bright. Not quite full, but bright enough to make everything feel exposed and eerie at the same time. We ended up in this little park near some houses. Not a massive place, but it has this trail that curves, and the trees sort of lean in over it like a tunnel. There's a bench right where the path bends, and once you're in that spot, it feels secluded, like you've stepped into another pocket of the world. We were talking for maybe 45 minutes, just standing there in the dark, having one of those conversations that's half closure, half reopening a wound. And at some point, I noticed movement further down the path. Shapes, really. I assumed it was a couple walking dogs. We couldn't see them clearly because of the trees, but every now and then we'd hear a little jingle, like tags clinking, and faint footsteps near the bench area. Then, out of nowhere, we heard a man scream. And I don't mean a startled shout. I mean this raw, ripping scream like someone was being hurt badly, like pain you can't control. It wasn't "help me," it was just agony. The kind of sound that makes your stomach drop before your brain even catches up. Cal and I looked at each other and immediately bolted. No hesitation. We ran out of the park so fast, I'm surprised we didn't trip over the uneven path. The scream kept going behind us, echoing through the trees, and it honestly sounded like the man was being dragged or torn up. Not stabbed, not punched. Mauled is the only word that fits, and that's what freaks me out. Because this is the UK. Your brain scrambles for something logical, like fox? But I've never heard anything like that, and I've never known a fox to do that to a grown man. We got out near the gate, onto the pavement, and we just stood there, breathing hard, trying to process what we'd just heard. Cal completely froze, like his body just locked up. I had my phone out, thumb hovering over the emergency call screen. It was around 1:50 a.m. by then, and the screaming didn't stop. It went on for another, 5 minutes, maybe closer to 8. Long enough that it stopped feeling like a moment and started feeling like a nightmare you can't wake up from. And Cal actually took a step like he was going to go back in, like instinct kicked in, maybe to help, maybe to check, and I grabbed his arm and said, "No, absolutely not." Because whatever was doing that to someone, if it could make a grown man make that sound, what were we supposed to do? Run in with our hands? Get ourselves added to it? It sounds harsh, but it was survival. Pure survival. Then, suddenly, silence. Like someone hit a switch. And in the quiet, all we could hear was this tiny dog barking. Little yappy barks. Like, almost normal. Which made it even worse somehow. Because where did the man go? How do you go from that level of screaming to nothing? And then we heard a woman's voice. That's the part that made my curiosity override my fear for a second. I know, stupid. But it was like my brain needed to see something to match the sound. So we walked along the outside of the park, staying on the pavement. We didn't go back in, just moved to where we could see the area near that bend. The park has these small gates, maybe chest height, and we were well outside them. Far enough away that I felt sort of safe. And that's when I saw her. A woman standing there, kind of still, like she was waiting. I couldn't make out her face, just her outline under the dim light. And near her, on the ground, there was this black shape. At first I thought it was a person lying down, but then it moved. And I swear to you, the way it moved was wrong. It didn't move like a dog running or a person crawling. It was like this thick shadow slid along the ground, like a body dragging itself, but smoother. Almost like something being pulled without legs. Like ink spreading. Like slime, honestly. That's the closest comparison I have, even though it sounds ridiculous. Then it rose. Not all at once, kind of unfolding, and when it stood up, the shape changed. It became this big dog-like figure, like the silhouette of a shepherd or something similar. Tall at the shoulders, solid, completely dark. And the moment it stood, it turned, like it knew we were there. I remember being weirdly stuck, like my body forgot how to react because my brain was trying to label what I was seeing. It's just a dog. It's just a dog. Except, it didn't feel like just a dog. It felt like something that had been pretending to be part of the night and then decided it didn't need to hide anymore. And then it started coming toward us. Slowly at first. Not charging, just closing the distance. And the thing is, we weren't even inside the park. We were outside the gates, across the pavement, nowhere near that bench. But it was still moving toward us like we'd stepped into its space. I didn't even have to say anything to Cal. We looked at each other and we both ran, immediately. Full sprint. No, should we? No, maybe it's fine. Just gone. We ran through side streets, cutting corners, not even caring where we were going as long as we weren't there. I kept looking back and couldn't see much, but I didn't stop. I didn't slow down until my lungs burned. And even now, what messes with my head is the questions. Where did the screaming man go? Why did it end so suddenly? Why was the woman so calm? Why was there only a tiny dog barking after all that? And if her big dog attacked someone, or attacked the small dog, why would she just stand there like nothing happened? Why would she stay in the park at all after hearing those sounds? And why did that thing move toward us? I've had friendly dogs come up to me before, sure, but in daylight, wagging their tail, normal dog behavior. This was different. This was 2 a.m., in the dark, and it felt purposeful. Like it wasn't curious, it was approaching. I don't expect anyone to solve it. I just needed to say it out loud in a way that matches how it felt. Because I can't make sense of it. And that's the part that still makes my skin go cold when I think about it. Okay, so I need to tell you this like I lived it, because I did, and it still gives me that weird, tight feeling in my chest. 2 things happened within 3 days, and I live in the capital, huge city, loud all day, but at night you can actually see the outline of the mountains wrapping around it. Out here, people talk about strange lights sometimes, It's not common, but it's also not unheard of. And the part that matters is, it's almost always out there, toward the mountains or the hills that slope down toward the coast. Always distant, always, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. For context, because this didn't start out as the main event, there were a couple sightings recently that felt like the usual kind of weird. Back in mid-October, around 2 in the morning, I saw this bright crimson light hanging over the mountains. Not blinking, not drifting, just sitting there like someone pinned it to the sky. It stayed for maybe 8 minutes, perfectly still, and then it didn't fade, it didn't move away, just gone, like a switch flipped. Then, a few weeks later, early December, I caught an amber-colored light shooting across the sky around 9:20 at night. It was fast, so fast I barely had time to register it before it vanished. 2 seconds, maybe less. And honestly, sightings like those, that's the kind of thing people around here shrug at. Huh, that was odd. Then you go back inside. But what happened after that wasn't like that, not even close. Because the other stuff is always miles away, right? Out over the hills, far enough that your brain can keep a little distance from it. This time it wasn't far. This was right above me. It was the 16th, early evening, like 8:45. I was walking out to grab some bread and something quick for dinner. I always look up when I'm outside at night. It's a habit. I love the sky. It calms me down. So I'm walking, I glance up, and I just freeze. I literally said out loud, "What the hell is that?" There was this tiny orb, like a little bead of light, moving overhead. Not high like a plane, closer. Close enough that it felt personal, like it was in my space. At first I tried to be logical. My brain went, "Okay, drone," because what else are you supposed to think? But then the orb did something that made my stomach drop. A second light appeared, almost like it split off from the first one, like the original light produced another one. And now there were two, gliding in the same direction, kind of slow, heading south over the rooftops. And then, no drift, no speeding away, nothing dramatic. They just vanished, like they were never there. And the craziest part is, I wasn't alone. 3 other people were outside. I could tell they'd seen it because they had that same expression I'm sure I had. Mouth slightly open, eyes following the sky, that silent question written on their faces. Did you see that? Nobody even really spoke. We just shared that moment of disbelief, and then everyone sort of scattered back into their own lives like we hadn't all just watched reality glitch for a second. But I didn't go back to normal. Ever since that night, I've had this feeling, like the air changed, like something noticed us noticing. And every night since then, I've caught myself staring at dark windows, listening harder than I should, feeling like I'm being watched. And then, 3 nights later, it got worse. It was around 3:10 in the morning. I was in bed, watching something low on the TV, trying to keep the room calm. Elena went to the bathroom, and when she came back, she paused by the window. We live on the 4th floor, so we can see the street pretty clearly. She looked out for a second, and then she turned to me. And I swear to you, the look on her face was the exact look I had when I saw the lights. She looked back out the window like she needed to confirm it. Then she faced me again and said, quietly but very certain, "I saw something weird, walking across the street." Instant chills, because I already had that being watched feeling, but I wasn't expecting her to say that. I asked her what she meant, and she described it as this small, dark figure, like a silhouette, moving fast on 2 legs. Not a person she could make out, no details, just shape and motion. And here's the part that made my skin crawl. She said it was heading toward the same direction, the same area, where I'd seen the orbs disappear a few nights earlier. so of course I went to the window. I had to. I needed to see something, anything, some rational explanation. But I didn't see the figure. What I did see was the building across the street, this new apartment block that's still empty, not officially open yet. Dark, unfinished looking. And in that darkness I kept catching movement, little shadowy shifts, like something ducking around corners. Not one clear shape, more like multiple quick movements. The kind you almost convince yourself you imagined, except it happened again and again. Like something was trying not to be seen, but also wasn't really leaving. It felt like watching, like we were the ones being watched. And we just stood there, silent, staring at this dead building at 3 a.m, sick and exhausted, with the city completely still beneath us. Neither of us slept after that. And even now, telling you this, I can feel that same uneasy pressure in my chest, like the night didn't end when the sun came up. We have no idea what Elena saw. I don't know if it was a person, an animal, a trick of the light, or something else entirely. But I do know this. Whatever happened those nights didn't feel distant anymore. It felt close. It felt like it knew where we were. So, when I was little, we lived in this old 2-story rental that never felt completely quiet, even when it was. We were upstairs, me, my parents, and my 2 half-sisters, and the landlord, Mr. Preacha, lived downstairs with his family. My mom, Lydia, always had this uneasy explanation ready. The place has bad energy. The house sat at the end of a narrow dead-end street, and straight ahead, almost like the house was staring at it, was a hospital. She hated that. Said it invited the wrong kind of traffic, if you know what I mean. The thing is, my parents came at all of this from totally different worlds. My dad, Thon Nguyen, is Buddhist, and when he was a boy in Myanmar, he trained as a novice monk for a while. Even now, he's the kind of person who walks into a room and instantly goes, "Something's off." Like he can feel a mood the way other people feel temperature. My mom and my sisters were Catholic, and honestly, they fought about everything. They could argue about a spoon. But the one thing they didn't argue about was this. Something strange was in that house. One of my sisters, Maris, was away at university most of the year and only came home for winter break and summer. Her room was at the end of the hallway, and I swear, it always felt colder there, like this thin, steady draft that didn't make sense. The window would be latched, the vent would be closed. Still, that air moved. Then one night, while she was home for break, she woke up and said it felt like someone shoved her down into the mattress. Like hands, like weight. She told us she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and it was as if the air got pulled right out of her chest. When she finally snapped out of it, she was shaking so hard she couldn't even sit up. And she was very specific about one detail. She said she was sure it was a woman. Not a voice exactly, more like a certainty. A presence with a shape, even in the dark. Maris even believed it followed her back from a hotel she'd stayed at a week earlier, like she'd accidentally brought something home. I know. People say sleep paralysis, and I've read about that too. But what stuck with me was that she never had anything like that happen in her dorm. Not once. And not later in any of the apartments she lived in after. Only in that room. Only in that house. About a year later, everything fell apart in a very human way. My parents divorced. My mom and sisters moved out, and my dad stayed behind alone for a while. That's when things got louder. He told me he'd be sitting in the bedroom and hear someone in the kitchen softly calling his name. Thon. Like it was someone trying not to wake the neighbors. He'd walk out there and the whole place would be still. No TV, no radio, just that heavy silence that comes after you know you heard something. And at night, he said he could feel two somethings enter the room. Not footsteps, not creaking floors, just the feeling of a presence crossing the threshold, the way you can tell someone is standing behind you even before you turn around. Eventually, he moved out and found a small apartment on the other side of town. We all hoped it would end there. New place, new start. But then my grandfather, my dad's father, came to visit from Hong Kong. He slept on the sofa, and my dad dozed off in a recliner nearby. In the middle of the night, my dad jolted awake in that panicked, choking way, like he was drowning on dry land. My grandfather was wide awake, and the next morning, he told my dad something that still makes my skin prickle. He said he'd seen it, not a trick of light, not a passing car. A shape, lingering, pressed down over my dad like a weight. My grandfather asked him, very calmly, "Is this place clean?" After my grandfather left, it got worse. My dad said it became a nightly thing, this pressure, this suffocating feeling, like something was testing him. He'd hear cabinet doors shifting, like someone rummaging without actually opening them. Doors clicking, the kind of sounds that make you sit up and hold your breath because you're waiting for the next one. And my dad, he's always had a temper. When he gets scared, he gets angry. So he started yelling into the apartment, telling it to leave, demanding it stop. But that only seemed to provoke it. Not long after, he found out something the building manager hadn't mentioned. A man had died in that exact unit just months earlier. Heart attack. Alone. His wife and kids had left him not long before. And I remember thinking, of course that's the detail that makes my dad go quiet. Because it mirrored his life too closely. He'd just been left behind by his own family, living in the same kind of loneliness, in the same kind of room. A year after the divorce, my dad ended up needing major heart surgery himself, triple bypass. It felt like his life was echoing someone else's tragedy, like the walls were holding on to it and feeding it back. Now, today, he lives in a senior apartment complex, bright hallways, clean carpets, the kind of place you'd assume would feel safe. And he still swears these things happen. A few months ago, he called me late, sounding embarrassed but shaken. He said he'd been in the bedroom and heard someone in the kitchen. Light movements, like a person cooking. He went out to check and said the kitchen felt used, like someone had just been there. He even touched the refrigerator handle and said it felt slick, oily, like someone had handled it with greasy hands. There was oil spattered near the stove. A couple spice jars were tipped over, and one of his mugs on the counter had seasoning sprinkled into it, like someone absent-mindedly ruined it and walked away. No one else had keys. No staff had been inside. No explanation that made sense. He's also told me about little things that stack up. The elevator doors opening on their own from across the hall when no one is waiting. The feeling of being followed on the stairwell, like a presence keeping pace one step behind him. And I don't know how to wrap it up neatly, because I don't have a neat answer. I just know my dad has always been porous, somehow. Like the boundary between him and whatever else is out there is thinner than it is for most people. Maybe it's his history. Maybe it's his sensitivity. Maybe it's just bad luck and a mind that never stops scanning for danger. Or maybe some people really do attract things. And if any of this sounds familiar to you, if you've ever lived somewhere that felt like it had eyes, or had a family member like my dad, someone who seems to carry a shadow with them, please tell me I'm not alone in this. Hey, thanks for letting me ramble a little. I promise I'm not trying to be dramatic, but I need to lay this out the way it's actually been happening, because it's starting to scare me in a really specific way. So my partner Caleb and I moved into this unit in a 4-unit house in a historic neighborhood. You know the kind. Old trees, creaky porches, pretty on the outside, and everything inside has that 1920s bones feeling. The place used to be one big house before it got divided up into separate units, probably decades ago. What we didn't know, what no one thought to mention, and what we only started hearing later, is that this house has a reputation. Apparently, before the current owner bought it in the 90s, it had a shady stretch of years. People around the neighborhood talk like it used to be a spot for all kinds of illegal business. Rumors of a makeshift brothel, drug dealing, the whole whispered lore thing. And the unit we moved into? We're the ones with the attic access, where, according to local gossip, a lot of the worst stuff supposedly happened. People even hint that there was violence here, like real violence. Not, oh, spooky house violence. The kind that leaves people feeling weird even after the story's done being told. But here's the thing. We didn't move in because we wanted a haunted house experience. We moved in because it was available. It was close to where we'd been living, and it seemed fine. What makes this harder to brush off is that we used to live nearby. We watched couples move into this exact unit over and over. Different faces, different ages, different vibes, and more than once it ended the same way. Sudden relationship chaos. Like messy fights out of nowhere, breakups that seemed too fast for people who had been fine, and then someone would be hauling boxes back out within a month or two. Caleb and I aren't superstitious, so we always chalked it up to coincidence, stress, money, whatever. Life happens. Until it started happening to us. Because I swear to you, we were solid. Like the kind of relationship you protect with your whole chest. We're the couple our friends roll their eyes at because we communicate, we apologize, we check in, we do the work. We've always felt like a team. We've even joked we're annoyingly healthy. And then we moved in, late spring this year, and it was like someone quietly swapped our personalities when we weren't looking. Almost immediately, we started snapping at each other. Not normal bickering, I mean irrational. Picking fights over nothing, misreading tone, feeling offended by tiny things, getting that sudden heat-in-your-face anger that doesn't even match what's happening. And it's not just one of us, it's both. Like we're both getting tugged into the same ugly current. Worse, we've both been having intense dreams, bad ones. The kind where you wake up with your heart racing and you're mad at the person next to you even though they didn't do anything. Dreams where the other person is cruel or distant or betraying you. Dreams that leave a residue. And here's the part that messes with my head the most. When we leave the apartment, like even just go sit in the car or walk a few blocks, something lifts. We can talk like ourselves again. We'll look at each other and be like, what was that? Why did I say that? Why did I feel like that? We're apologetic, but also genuinely confused, like we're reviewing footage of two people we don't recognize. Then we came home, unlocked the door, and it was like the atmosphere tightened, like we walked back into a room that doesn't want peace in it. And I know how that sounds. I do. If someone told me this story a year ago, I'd be like, okay, but are you sleeping enough? Are you stressed? Is it moving fatigue? And sure, moving is stressful, but this doesn't feel like stress. Stress makes you tired. This feels like something pressing buttons. On top of all that, there have been these small, creepy little things. Nothing movie level, but enough to make you freeze for a second. Cabinets we swear we closed sitting open when we come back into the kitchen. Couch cushions shifted in a way that doesn't make sense. And one day in the backyard, I touched the handlebar of an old bike we keep out there, and this weird, dark, oily gunk, like black residue, kind of spit out of the end. That one really got me, because it wasn't just, oh, maybe we forgot. It was physical, and it was gross, and it was sudden. Our dog Miso has been restless here too, pacing, staring down the hallway like he's listening to something. Not constantly, but enough that we've noticed, and we're not people who normally assign meaning to every little animal behavior. It just feels like the whole apartment has a hum to it, and none of us can fully relax. We've tried to do the responsible stuff. Therapy, long talks, being intentional, even praying, which we don't usually do as a go-to solution, but we're at that point where you start trying anything that might bring relief. And the scariest part is that we're starting to feel helpless. Not because we don't love each other, we do, deeply, but because we can't predict when we'll get pulled into that ugly version of ourselves inside these walls. And I want to be really clear, I'm not blaming Caleb. I'm not painting him as the villain. He's been acting unlike himself, and so have I. That's what makes it feel so wrong. We both keep looking back and thinking, that's not who I am. That's not how I love you. We're already trying to move out as soon as we can, like, actively. But until then, I don't know what to do. So if you're listening and you've been through something like this, something where a space seems to change people, what would you do? Would you cleanse it somehow? Ask someone to bless it? Open windows, burn something fragrant, put up protective stuff, whatever people do? I'm not above anything that's kind and harmless at this point. I just want us to make it through this with our relationship intact, and with our sanity. Because I love him. I love us. And I hate the feeling that the moment we walk through our own front door, we're not fully in control of the story anymore. Okay, so I need to tell you what happened tonight, because I'm still kind of buzzing from it. I went to the cemetery to visit my friend, Ethan. He was buried earlier this week, Tuesday, and I've been going every day since. It's become this quiet little ritual, you know? Just showing up, sitting with him for a bit, talking like he can still hear me. I got there around 9:30-ish, maybe closer to 9:40 p.m. The cemetery is one of those you can actually drive through, and the burial tent was still set up from the service, so I did what I've been doing, parked near the back and walked over. Last night I went alone, no problems. No weird feelings, no odd sounds, nothing. Just sad, quiet, normal. Tonight I brought a friend with me, Maya, because it was a holiday night and I didn't really want to be out there by myself. We sat under the tent for a while. I even lit one of those tiny candles, the little metal ones, because I'd left a candle there the night before and it felt right to keep that going. We just talked softly, reminisced, sat in the cold for a bit. Honestly, the first part of the night felt peaceful. But when we finally stood up to leave, around 10:10, everything shifted. We started walking back toward my car, and that's when we heard it. This low, growling sound. Then barking. Not playful barking either, more like something warning you or guarding something. It was coming from deeper in the cemetery, somewhere between the rows. I remember stopping and doing that thing where you hold your breath without realizing it, like your body is trying to listen harder. Maya and I looked at each other like, did you hear that? We didn't want to run. Running felt like the wrong move, so we just kept walking, faster but controlled, trying not to panic. And then we saw it. A big white dog, like big, shepherd-sized at least. But it wasn't solid white. There were darker patches along its side, like stains or spots. It didn't charge at us. It didn't even come toward us. It just paced back and forth, kind of sideways in the distance, like it couldn't decide whether to leave or stay. And the weirdest part was the way it felt. I know that sounds dramatic, but it didn't look like a normal dog. There was something off about its movements, too steady, too deliberate. Maya kept saying she could still hear it growling the entire time, even when it wasn't moving its mouth. We both turned our flashlights off after a second because, I don't know, instinct. Like we didn't want to draw attention to ourselves. Maya kept her eyes locked on the dog, and I kept mine fixed on my car like it was the only real thing left in the world. We kept walking, and then, this part still messes with me, the dog just wasn't there anymore. It didn't run behind a tree. There weren't bushes to disappear into. The cemetery is open, flat. You can see across it, and we were both watching it. 1 second, pacing. Next second, gone. We got to the car, and I swear I didn't feel relief until I clicked the lock and heard that little thunk. I sat there for a moment with my hands on the wheel like I'd forgotten what driving even was. And then, as I started backing out, we heard a woman scream, "Help!" Clear as day, not like a distant radio, not like someone's phone. It sounded outside, near the cemetery, close enough that my stomach dropped instantly. We didn't talk much on the way back, just silence and heavy breathing, and that feeling you get when something happens that you can't file away neatly in your brain. When we got to Maya's place, we finally got out, and that's when we noticed something else. On the trunk of my car, there were these long drag marks, like fingers had been pulled slowly across it. Not scratches like branches, more like oily, streaky lines. And on the passenger door, there were 2 clear fingerprints, like someone had pressed their fingertips right into the surface. Fresh. Distinct. And I know for a fact they weren't there earlier, because I'm weirdly picky about my car being clean, and I would have noticed. We stood there staring at it like, what are we even looking at? And I hate saying this because it makes me sound like I'm trying to turn it into some big paranormal thing, but it genuinely felt connected. Like the night didn't end when we left the cemetery, it followed us right up to the driveway. We didn't even think to take pictures at the time. We were too shaken. It was only later, when I calmed down a little, that I realized how badly I wished I had proof of what we saw. So now I'm sitting here, trying to make sense of it. Was it just a stray dog and weird timing? Was it someone messing with us? Was the scream even real? Or did our brains just fill in the worst possibility because we were already scared? I don't know. All I know is that it didn't feel normal. And I can't stop replaying that moment where the dog simply vanished, like it was never there at all. Have you ever experienced anything like this? The growling, the feeling of being watched, the voice, any of it? Because I really, really want a normal explanation for what happened tonight.